Hello everyone, it is time for this week's live stream. We're going to talk about those things you see in your tank. You're like, is this a good guy or a bad guy? I've got an older presentation that was on my iPad and I decided to use that today because not all of you were around when I gave that talk. And when I gave it to local clubs. I probably presented it at Aquashella or at Macna, or it's just been sitting there getting dusty. And I thought, we're going to kind of rehash it because there's new people coming into the channel. So let's just get started with the show. I want to thank Rogers Reef for being a sponsor of this channel. They provide a type of frozen food that you should be able to get at your local fish store. If you can't get it there, ask them to order it in for you. This is the time when I talk about you should be a subscriber to Coral Magazine. The price is going up. I said it already went up. Looks like there's a little window there. It didn't quite happen because I'm not good with calendars. So if you're not a subscriber to Coral Magazine, I would encourage you to do so. Also, I'll hold this up for a second. This is the current issue right now that's out. If you don't have this, if you wished you did, if you regret not being a subscriber, in this video's link already there, I put it there. There's a link right to my website where you can buy it, and I'll mail it to you. I've got, I don't know, a dozen copies on hand. So if you're wanting to see what this was all about, this is a really cool issue specifically talking about the Mahoensis clownfish that is a new species from Tahiti. So definitely something. It's a huge article, by the way. Giant, enormous. 26 pages. It's got some fantastic pictures too. All right, before I put you guys in a what do you call it, into a tizzy with this changing of the pictures, I'm going to slow that thing down for next time. Also, I want to remind you that I do one-on-one consultations. If you need help, we can do a video chat. I get to see your system, answer your questions. Maybe I'll spot something that's wrong. I can assist you with it. And I do it for a fee, so email me at sales@mealsreef.com. It's no secret. I charge $125 for that time. If we, it's for an hour, and if we go longer, I don't charge extra. So here I am, and I want to show you one more thing before we get into our topic. That's this guy right here. So this is something that I made years ago. Actually, Caitlin came up with it years ago. She said, when you're acclimating a fish in your 2-gallon bucket, how can we keep them from jumping out accidentally? And so she came up with the premise, and she asked me to design it. I cut it out. I've been using it ever since. Every time I get a new fish, this is designed to fit in a 2-gallon bucket. So if you're wanting this, I finally located the original file because someone has been asking me for a while, Mark, where is it? I want to buy it. So this is going on the website today. It's $36. This right here is basically the handle to set it in the bucket. There's a notch right here that will be for your airline tubing, and if you want to use a small heater, you just put the cord in that through there and set it down, and the fish will not be able to escape while you walk away, especially if you're doing the safety stop bath that I do, where the new fish is in this solution for 45 minutes, gets transferred to another bucket. You could attach airline tubing to this John Guest fitting. I just don't see the point, because you're going to lift it out and the air stone's going to come with it. I just think if you have the notch, you can remove the lid and then remove things separately. I just like this. This is my preference. So there you go. It's 1/4 inch. It's durable. Odds are you won't break it unless you sling it down on concrete. And it'll last you the rest of your reef keeping career if you're a good person. And the only thing you'll replace is going to be the 2-gallon bucket, because buckets are not forever. Okay, so let's just jump right into our first slide. I want to thank you all for being here. I see quite a few people have already jumped into the chat, so here is our next one. So what is a reef tank pest? Let's see if I can get myself in the frame here. It's anything that doesn't belong. And not everything is a pest, and that's something I wanted to emphasize here at the very beginning. And I've got a ton of slides. This is actually a really long presentation. I will do what I can to shorten it. I will try to keep an eye on the chat at the same time in case something comes up so I can answer it instantly while we're in that area. It's not very easy for me to do because I try to stay on topic, but if your question is on the topic, perfect timing. So the pest would be something that can eat or sting or destroy something you care about. It causes injury, it causes infections, it causes murder, and we don't want that to happen. It's something that can be harmful to the corals, to yourself, or even to the fish. So we want to just make sure that if there is something in your tank, is it something you have to worry about? Is it something you can kind of ignore? Will it take care of itself? Which is actually an interesting point that was in this issue I just pushed a second ago about mutualism. So there was one article specifically that talked about how having all the different parts of the biological puzzle in your aquarium is actually beneficial. And if you have a specific thing in there that doesn't belong, you're probably lacking the other thing that helps it stay under control. So we're going to talk about all these critters right here. There's a whole bunch on your slide. If you're just, I'm sorry, on your screen. If you are just listening to this, there's a lot of pictures in this presentation. I'd almost recommend you jump onto YouTube and watch this, with a screen. Put it on your television if you like. We do, I've always been broadcasting in 4K for a reason, so that it looks decent. So we're going to go into things like Aptasia, Mahanos, Asterinas, bristle worms. We're going to talk about isopods and crabs, flatworms, algae, mantis shrimp. Are they really glass busters? Montipore, nudibranchs, pyramidellid snails, redbugs, zoanthids, nudibranchs, and more. There's so many. This is a crazy long one. So first of all, Aptasia. These are also called glass anemones. A lot of times you'll see that in Coral Magazine. But we try to just maybe mention that once, because typically in America we just say Aptasia. That's just what they are. And they are just a pest anemone that are essentially clear until they've been in your tank for a while. And especially in areas where they're well lit, they can turn brown with the symbiotic zooanthely that's within their body. So here's one that was on one of the rocks in my tank. I've dealt with them on and off for years. They're actually not a pest in my 400 gallon. There is a handful that are in a spot my copper band can't get to, and I just don't care. There are quite a few in the anemone tank where the bubble tips are, and it's like, again, I don't care. But if they were inside an acropora colony stinging and killing the coral, then I'd care. And if you're trying to get rid of it, you would use something simple like like F-Aptasia, which is a great product that Frank's Tanks came out with. These right here are Mahanos. They are not Aptasia. And I remember there was this one time, there was a thread on, or I'm sorry, yeah, I guess you can call it a thread on Facebook that's, somebody said, what is it? I don't know what this is. And the person said, it's an Aptasia. And I was like, no, it's not. I said, it's a Mahano. And he says, it's the same thing. I'm like, it's definitely not the same thing. It's a completely different species. And he's like, it just means it's bad. I'm like, so I don't feel like we should trivialize the things we're sharing with each other, and we definitely should be giving proper identification to these creatures, because if we don't, then we're going to be passing on bad information to the next person. Kevin mentions vermitids. That is coming up. Now here's a tank full of Mahanos, and that rock is just covered. And in this case here, the fish story decided to just fill the tank with these rocks of Mahanos and just put in a Klein's butterfly to consume them rather than to try and deal with them one at a time. You definitely could hit each of these with F-Aptasia, for example. You could also try removing the rock and scrape them off one at a time, but you're having to scrape off all the tissue. If you leave anything behind, that little bit of skin, that little bit of DNA will grow another pest anemone. My own system had a problem with tons of them, where I'm talking about the frag system. It was just thousands, and I told you about it earlier this year. I drained the tank and bleached it, and then I restarted the tank, and now the tank is filled with algae, but there's not one Mahano. So winning? I don't know. This is one of the natural predators you could purchase for Aptasia control. It's a Bergia nudibranch, and the best thing you could possibly do is keep them in a separate tank and take the rock with the Aptasia and put it in the tank with the Bergias. This is something that Devin Rich was doing at Reef Dudes, and he had time-lapse video. He had a fantastic video. I should really beg him to give it to me, where it was a time-lapse and it showed the Bergia just consuming rapidly the Aptasia, and the Aptasia was just evaporating, so to speak. So, another choice that's on this list of things you could use is going to be peppermint shrimp. You could use a copper band butterfly fish. You can use a laser. I've done boiling water with the Mahanos before. Not just poured it over, but I've filled a syringe with boiling water. You had to work really quickly. You got the water boiling on the stove. You run over with your syringe, just slurp it up. You run to your aquarium, you squirt it into the Mahano, and then you run back to the stove to get some more boiling water. It was quite the ordeal. At this point, it just seems simpler to use F-Aptasia. Now, let me explain how Aphantasia works in case you haven't used it yet. I do sell it. It's in my shop. It's a fantastic product that you have to mix so incredibly, you just have to really mix it. Like when you think you're done mixing, you keep mixing. If anything, like there's a little wooden paddle stick, like a miniature version of a popsicle handle, or a tiny tongue depressor. And if you could somehow put that in the end of a drill and just spin the solution, that would be amazing, because it's really hard to mix it. But once it's fully mixed, you fill the syringes, you stop all the flow in the tank, and you cover the pest completely, like you're putting a lot of frosting on a cupcake. You just want to completely make it just covered. And then you got to leave the flow off for about an hour. I know initially it said 30 minutes, maybe 45, but if you turn on the flow and it starts to blow, stop the pumps again and wait. You want that frosting to harden. And what's happening is the animal underneath is not only being smothered by this frosting, but there's an acid in there that's destroying it, which is fantastic. And we don't want this acid to blow around in the tank. So you want to make sure that it has turned hard. After 3 days, so now as soon as it's not blowing around the tank, you turn on the flow. And then 3 days later, you can go in there and you can just chip off this cocoon you created, and you can get rid of it. Or you can just ignore it, and it'll just dissolve away on its own. It'll just break up over time. The one I sell is coralline colored. It's $25 for a 2-ounce bottle, which should go a long way. And it just works. And I know people have used it on lots of things, but specifically it was designed for Aphantasia and Mahanos. All right, Astorina starfish are a little tiny white starfish that appear in our tank. They are hitchhikers. No one buys them intentionally. They just show up. And the thing is, they split via fission, where you can notice some have larger legs and others, the legs are smaller. That's because it had torn itself in half. And so in that upper left corner, the middle of the screen, we'll say, there you can see 2 arms. And then on that lower one, you can see a couple large arms, and you got some smaller ones. And you can kind of see the stomach sticking out in that one where I'm holding it with the tweezers. And this little guy here will just go through a tank and eat film algae off the glass, off rocks. It can work its way up the side of a coral. Again, just trying to eat what it can, but it's not a coral destroyer. Some people tend to think they wreck their zoanthids or they kill their SPS. That's usually not the common truth. Some are semi-predatory. I've come across one specific type that when I looked at it in my kitchen, under normal kitchen lighting, it was kind of a greenish color. But when they're tan and white, I found that they are no problem at all. My reef has hundreds of them, and I absolutely do not care. And I've seen them do no harm. They just do their thing. They just work their way around the tank. They're not even nocturnal. They're out whenever. And so I just use the cleaning magnet. One thing you should know, if you find these things and you're doing your cleaning magnet, and if you have an acrylic tank, don't let it get caught against the cleaning magnet, because the body of the starfish is really coarse, like sandpaper. And as you go cleaning the glass, or cleaning the acrylic specifically, you will leave scratches behind. And I've done that, and I was so mad at myself, because I was like, oh, I'm sure it'll just fall off. The stupid thing did not just fall off. It got trapped, and I just kept going, thinking it had fallen off, and I scratched my beautiful tank. So that made me mad. If you're trying to get rid of them the natural way, harlequin shrimp are a great way to consume them. They will literally find them all and eat them all. But then once you have no more Astorinas in your tank, this shrimp will die without food, and it needs to eat starfish. So you now have the responsibility of buying it starfish to keep it fed, because you like the animal. And in my case, at one point back in the early 2000s, I had thousands and thousands of Astorinas, and so I got a pair of these. One was blue and one was pink, so clearly one was a boy and one was a girl, right? And I put it in there, and them in there, and they were doing their thing. And one day I was like, hey, wow, I don't see any Astorinas. That's amazing. And I swear, it was like a couple days later, where are my harlequin shrimp? And I was like, oh, wow, I did not think this through. That's why I'm saying you must buy food for it now. So some people will buy like a chocolate chip starfish, which is kind of predatory for a reef tank. Well, not kind of, it is. But they're buying it so that this shrimp can eat it. And it's kind of gross, but they would like cut off one leg at a time and put that in the tank for the shrimp, and then the rest of the starfish went in the freezer. So I never did that. Another starfish that eats starfish is a Nardoa starfish. And you can see this one here has expelled its stomach, that orange part, over the Astorina, and it will consume it. John Wright says he loves his Astorinas, and Than at Tidal Gardens does too, says they're free cleanup crew. And yeah, like I said, I have had no reason to not like them. They're easy to remove. You can just go in your tank if you wanted to daily, and you can just remove them by hand with tweezers, forceps, or with your fingertips, maybe if you're lucky. But for the most part, they're just a nothing burger. Just nothing to worry about. Oh, I mentioned greenish. I said it backwards. The bluish ones under my aquarium lighting were the ones that seemed to do damage, but the greenish ones seem to be benign. Glad I caught that on my slide. Okay, I don't have a lot of pictures of bristleworms, I don't think. This was a photograph from Ron Shemek in a presentation he gave where he was showing the different parts of a bristleworm. It's, obviously microscopic photographs. Pretty crazy, right? But this is what you normally see in your tank. This pink thing with little white appendages down the side that look hair-like. A lot of times people discover them when they reach in their tank and they touch the bristleworm inadvertently, accidentally. They're reaching in and just pulling something out, and they get stung, and they have all these bristles, these little needles sticking out of their skin. And lots of people have lots of approaches to get rid of them. Actually, the simplest solution is white vinegar. But when you are removing them from the tank, you should, if you are going to remove them, use forceps, which are just giant metal tweezers. You're going to use forceps for a lot of this. So I'm going to keep saying forceps. I just want to make sure you know what I'm talking about. You reach in, you pull out this big fat bristleworm that you discovered under a coral colony, for example, and you throw it in the refugium and let it live there. It will eat detritus. They are there to eat decaying matter. They are not fish eaters. They are not coral eaters. They're not here to destroy your beautiful reef. But as they get bigger and bigger and hungrier, their diet could change. But normally they're detrivores, which means they'll just eat what's decaying, just waste. Food that got away. Fish poop that landed elsewhere. That's what they do. Okay, so the needles. You've got the sting on your hand, your fingertip, your thumb, whatever it is, you grabbed it accidentally. All you have to do is fill a small bowl with white vinegar and submerge your thumb in that and hold it like that for 5 minutes, and the needles will just dissolve. They'll just be gone. You don't have to use duct tape. You don't have to apply super glue gel and peel it off and peel off your flesh with it. It's really easy to just use white vinegar. And it's painless. It's quick. Yeah, that's the answer. Now this worm here, the Onidi, it's coming up here in a second, I hope. Of course I don't have it on the slide. Onini fulgida. This worm moves so crazy fast, and you will never see it during the lighting period. Never. You just absolutely won't. This thing is completely 100% the nocturnal beast it's intended to be. It sneaks up on its prey. It will throw a gel on the prey to, what do you call it? Not to freeze it, but to... sort of like to stun it so that it can just consume it. So, like, what is its prey? Other things made of meat. So it will throw this toxin on snails, for example, and then just consume the snails right out of the shell. It's craziness. And it is not a bristleworm by any fashion. And in that lower picture, you can kind of see that it has more like fingers going on the side of its body. Papillae, I think they're called. And these things move so fast. It's craziness. And the one that I had in my sink was about 8 inches long. And I actually had it in a Saliford beaker to take a picture of it first. And it crawled out of the beaker, across my kitchen counter, down into the sink. And that's when I took that photograph and threw a tape measure near it just to show you. The front of it, the nose, looks like a platypus's mouth or bill. And it's got these cute little eyes, and it just looks so innocent. I mean, it just looks like this little Donald Duck looking thing, that no big deal. But the way I discovered it, when I add new snails to my aquarium, I don't just hold one at the glass at a time because it takes too long. If I, let's say I buy 100 snails, and I have to hold this one shell against the glass and wait for the snail to come out and grab onto the glass. Then I get the next snail. That would be 100 minutes of my life that I don't have. So instead, I take jelly jars that are already washed, rinsed, and kept, put away for this time, and I will put in 15, 20 snails in that jar, and I will set it somewhere in the tank, and I'll get another jar, do the same thing, and I put these jars in different parts of my reef, because after the lights turn out, all the snails will climb up the walls of the glass and down the side and disperse. It's sort of like slow motion popcorn. It's a really great way to get new snails into your tank, and making sure that they are not going to be consumed by a fish because they think it's food, because they're protected by the jar, so to speak. You may even have the snails climbing out. One climbs out on the glass and the other ones are holding onto its back, and it's like lifting 4 or 5 snails out at once. The first snail just does it because he wants to get out of the jar. But the problem was, I had this jar in my tank. I'm looking at the jars in the dark with a flashlight because the lights are out, and I see all the snails bubbling out. You know, they're coming out of their temporary holding jars. And there was this orange worm stretched from the rock all the way into the bottom of the jar, and there was like 3 shells upside down. And I was like, what's happening here? That's weird. And I'm like, these are brand new, just bought these snails. They're not dead. And of course, when the light hit it, that worm retracted so fast, it was like lightning. It was in the blink of an eye. It was crazy. So light responsive. It's just insane. So now that I knew what I was looking for, I had to catch it. And so I reached in, with again, the tank's dark, and I've got my flashlight pointed off to the side. Just give me a hint of light, just so I can barely see. And I've got the forceps in my hand. I'm lowering him into the tank. I'm trying to, I'm going to grab it, right? And of course, I'm nervous too, because I really want to get this thing, but it's just one of those things. It's not just a smooth operation like a surgeon. No, it's more like a guy that doesn't know what he's doing. And I try to grab it, and the thing, shoom, it's gone again. I was like, oh man. But the jar, the bait was there, and this worm wanted to eat those snails that it had tried to capture. Now, how does this thing retract so quickly, you might wonder? Because it's not made of rubber band. This thing puts out a gel like out of its body, like out of its segments of its body. It puts out this jelly lubricant. And so while it's stretching out, it is creating this membrane down the full length of the body. And that way, if it needs to retreat quickly, it just slides through the gel back into the rockwork. It's crazy. So this Onini fulgida, I'm saying the name again so you can Google it later, this is a bad predator to have. And according to Ron Shemek, who is our expert on all kinds of invertebrates for decades now, he said if you find one in your tank, you have more. And if you try to grab one and you get the tail, you didn't kill it. Just because you ripped off the tail, the worm continues to live. You gotta rip off the head if you want to win. So instead, every night I'd go hunting in my tank to find them. And sometimes there would be one stretched across a sand bed. And you could see this tube of sand kind of rolling back and forth across the sand because of that gel that's inside the grains of sand. It had created that gel cocoon. The sand grains were kind of sticking to it. And so you knew where this worm was or where it was going to be, basically, because it had already emerged and stretched itself out across the sand. So again, I went in with the forceps. I'm trying to capture it. And then I do my quick grab. And when I did it, the worm retracted instantly again, super fast. And what did I have in my forceps? Grains of sand that were trapped because they created just enough distance between the forceps metal to not come together to grab the worm. Super frustrating. Anyway, now you know how hard they are to catch. Now you know what you must do. You must literally grab them and rip them from the rock as best you can in one piece. You just pull and pull and pull and hopefully get the whole animal. And they can be quite long. The longest that I pulled out of my system was probably 15 inches. And anyway, they're you don't want them. So you can look for that. But the best way to catch them is going to be to have a jar with some kind of bait inside the jar for it to be attracted to versus just finding them accidentally as you're working your way through the tank, just with a flashlight. Yeah, might spot one, but it can retract really quickly. By the way, this is very different from something called a peanut worm, which I think is also in this presentation, so don't worry. You will not confuse them. They look completely different. Amphipods are good guys, in my opinion. My tank's filled with them. My sump will have them. If you run a filter sock, you might find them living inside the filter sock, and it would be best to save them and get them back into your system. There are some people that don't like amphipods. They feel like they harm their larger palithoa, which is the pallies, which are the larger version of zoanthids. But I've never had any amphipods that were detrimental to my system. So I call him a good guy. And look at this fantastic picture someone took. I forget who this was, but he took the photo. I said, can I please put that in my presentation? He said yes. Okay, this one here is a bad guy. This is a parasitic copepod. And so, we always talk about copepods. You got to put copepods in your tank. Copepods are good food and they're alive food, but there are some that are not good to have. I never did find out what type this was, but I just want to show you it so you're aware. They can actually, you know what? I wonder if this is them, the thing that Joe Waiulo has been talking about for the last year, because he has these crazy fast parasitic copepods that move crazy fast. And I think he said they like Bacillopora. So all those little white dots along the top inside that white skeleton that's dead coral now because of these copepods. I got to show this to Joe later. But anyway, they do a lot of damage. And they move really fast. I mean, if you were to like reach in the tank, they just like dissipate rapidly. Like roaches when you turn the lights on in the room. It's craziness. I wish that was a video. Maybe Joe knew about this, because it's the next slide says it. Maybe I got that from him. We added to this presentation. So he really does hate them, and his only cure was to fix it by using milbemycin, and he had to use enough to treat 20,000 gallons. But according to him, that amount of this medication amounted to half of a sugar packet, like you tear open to pour in your cup of coffee. I mean, it's just so little for such a vast system, but he's been using that to get rid of them. All right. This one I discovered in my local fish store at Frank's Tanks, and I was like, what on earth are those? And they are a acropora. Well, they're not an acropora eating flatworm, but they do eat acropora. I know it makes no sense, but they're not the kind people think of when you hear of acropora eating flatworms. These things, first of all, they're purple. And that's what this picture shows here. And you can kind of see one there. That's a video right there. You can see how one is crawling. And these things are just insane. I feel like that other thing, and see how small they are? It's like, I just happened to spot it. I was staring. I was like, what am I looking at? That's crazy. And I thought, I wish I had my Nikon with me. I was like, oh yeah, I can just take out my phone and stick it on the glass and zoom in and video this and get a good look at it. Let's go back to the other thing from Joe. I want to see if that was a video by any chance. It is. Okay, so he's going to poke it. Can you see how they're all jumping around? I don't know if you can see that, but there's hundreds and hundreds of them in that one spot. So anyway, you don't want those in your tank. And Joe didn't want them in his tank at all. So, yeah, just something to be aware of. For these flatworms, I would say your only solution is going to be to siphon them out. I don't know what predator would consume them specifically. You can try something like a yellow chorus wrasse. You could just see if that would do it. But, or a 6-line wrasse. A lot of times we try to think of fish we can put in there that will eat these. But will they eat them all? Or will they eat some of them and leave some behind to continue to destroy your precious corals? So we want to make sure that we're removing them whenever we can, and siphoning them out is one approach. Another approach is to literally take out the colony from your tank, cut off the affected area and throw it away, and keep the living part that's healthy and replant that in your tank and start fresh. This is a Cerulinid isopod. Cerulinid isopod, and this is the kind of isopod that gets on the side of a fish. It's pretty big. You should be able to see it with a naked eye. It's not something you need a microscope for. And it will just latch onto the side of a clownfish, for example, and that clownfish right there has 3 on its body. 1 on its stomach, 1 on its lower flank, and then 1 above its forehead, so to speak, or the top of its head. And these things are terrible, and they suck the life right out of your fish. The guy that worked really hard to get rid of these is no longer in the hobby, but he had a method of taking rotting fish food, put it in a small bowl, and stick that bowl down in the water of the tank, down low on the sand bed, basically. The cover of the bowl was covered with like a fabric or some kind of mesh, and then a slit was cut in it, and the idea was for these horrible isopods to swim through the water column, attracted to this dead, decaying food, and go into the container to eat. And then you'd remove the container in the morning filled with them. And you would just keep doing this over and over and over until eventually you pull out a bowl of rotting food and there's nothing in it. You're like, we finally got them all. They are really bad for your fish population. If you were to buy a fish with it on the fish, the bad thing is that it can jump to the next fish, and you can actually have more and more of these. So Reef Stewardship Foundation no longer exists as far as I know, but Brian was the person that had spearheaded this project, trying to help people stop having these in their tanks. Back then it was a big deal. I haven't heard about them in a long time, but they are out there, and so it goes on the pest list. When it comes to crabs, there's lots of crabs that we can purchase for our aquariums. Hermit crabs are very popular. Emerald crabs are very popular. And then there's other ones that we may not recognize. Now, this one kind of almost makes you think of the new Pithos crab I've been talking about lately. But when you're looking at crabs, you have to look at their pincers. And you have to see if they are a sharp pincer or if they're a flat pincer. Because a flat one that just comes together flatly, that one there will grab on bubble algae and remove it and consume it. The ones with the pincers will cut off coral polyps, will attack fish because they're vicious animals. Like this guy here that I nicknamed Arnold. You know, he's just all muscle. And this one here was in my tank, and he was killing my fish. And I was determined to remove him, so I went ahead and once I saw this, I was like, yeah, we have a problem here. He just literally climbed up the edge of the coral, and then he just went snip, and I was like, no way. But so let me tell you about this crab, because this is a good story. Not good for him. Spoiler. So this crab was living inside the hole of a rock in my 29-gallon, and he was killing fish. He was very, very active at night, and he would just find something sleeping and just destroy it. And so I was determined to remove it. Now, there's a trick. You can take a glass, and you can set it down in the tank at an angle with some food at the bottom, and the idea is that the crab will climb up the rockwork, go down, slide into the glass, get the food, but cannot climb back out because the glass is smooth. He has no way to purchase, and he's trapped. You lift the glass out in the morning, and you take him away. So that's the system. I couldn't do that in my tank. I don't think there was any room for a glass. It was a very small tank, and it was packed. But instead, I knew which hole he was in, and I was determined to eradicate this crab. And so I grabbed a fish net, the kind that, you know, the small one you'd catch fish with, and I ripped the net off, and then that green wire frame, I reshaped it to be like a spear, and I jammed it in the hole, and I just went round and round and round in that hole, and bits of crab came flying out, and all my fish ate him, and I felt really good about what I had accomplished. So if you had this type of crab in your tank and you were trying to get rid of it, and you said, well, I want to do a humane thing, or I don't want to be vicious, like, I get it. But like a lot of times you bring a crab like this to the fish store, it's like, I just want to give it a chance to live. They're going to give it to someone that has a predator that's going to eat it. So no matter what, it's food for something. In my case, by my destroying it in the tank, all my other fish got to eat him, which was, you know, payment for him killing several of my fish before I got around to it. But if you see a crab that has like furry legs and blue eyes, you should not trust it. Let me get you back on the slide so you see what I'm looking at here. Here's an example of that crab, and you can see the pinchers are very pointy and sharp. And it was so funny because I'm pretty sure I saw those and Frank was going to throw them away. I was like, oh, I'll put them in my tank. They're really cute. I love the blue eyes. And it was a terrible, terrible decision. And then this one here is just a picture I found on the web a long time ago. It's just a teddy bear crab. It's really pretty. I know nothing about it, but I had to include it. This one, this giant thing, that is 4 inches across. That was in my 280-gallon tank, and I never saw it but this one time. I took this picture. I never even saw the molt, which is insane. I was looking at the end of my tank from inside the fish room. The whole wall of the glass is covered in coralline, except for this little spot at the bottom, and there was this giant crab with, look at those claws. I was like, wow, where did this come from? How has it been in my system all this time? And it was just a ticking time bomb, but I never saw it. Never came across it again. You can sometimes remove a crab from the tank with tweezers if you're fast enough. You can remove the entire rock from the tank with it inside, and you can pour in carbonated water, or you can try pouring in peroxide and make that thing come scurrying out. That's one way, or like I mentioned, the tilted glass with a food bait. This little guy here is a pagarita crab, and I just shared some pictures of really pretty ones over on my Mila's Reef page on Facebook this week. I don't know if you saw it or didn't, but they live in Christmas tree worm rocks. So you've got this rock, It's got Christmas tree worms all over it. It's beautiful. And then all that area between the worms is usually porites. And where there's a hole, where there is no worm anymore, there's a pagarita crab. And this little crab here has these appendages coming off the top of its head that it's using to filter feed. And then it has those long claws in the front, which I don't know what it uses those for, to be honest. But I've watched this shrimp, or this crab, I'm sorry. I would watch this thing just sit in the water column and move those feathery appendages above its head back and forth to capture what blows through the water column, and then it would pull it down and it would just kind of clean it off with its claws to probably feed its mouth. So it was snacking off the appendages, and it's a pretty neat little crab. It's commensal. It doesn't do harm. The bottom part of that same picture is another one out of focus. And here's another picture. You can see a Christmas tree worm in the upper left. And then as you look down lower, on the lower right, you can see the crab's little pincers. And here's another picture of one. Now you can see the face, but it's a good guy. So don't kill it. It's awesome. It probably helps protect things, keep the coral clean too, for all I know. This one here I came across at an event in California, and the vendor had brought in a bunch of different corals to sell. And this crab came in as a hitchhiker and goes, "Mark, you want to see something really cool?" And I was like, "Yes." And I grabbed my camera instantly. So this is a Trapezia lutea. It's a type of commensal crab that lives in Pasillipora colonies and will keep the colony clean and protect it. And it lives within the colony, so it stays safe as well. That's why it's commensal. It's a really pretty crab, too. This one here, even though the pincers look like something you shouldn't trust, I wouldn't mind having that in my tank. This came in as a little, but not the small one you're thinking of. The baby brittle or micro starfish we get, the sea stars, they're so small. This one was a little bigger. The circle in the middle that is the body of this one was probably the size of an eraser head, and it had these black arms coming off of it with the brittle needles. And that's why it's called a brittle starfish. And I got this as a hitchhiker inside a coral colony. I was like, "Oh, that thing's cool. I like it." And I put it in my reef because starfish are good. And this thing grew to be enormous, and it lived inside my system. And one day I tried to take it out of the tank to take a picture of it, which was really difficult. And I remember standing in my kitchen, and I was holding the coral upside down, and it was just dripping coral slime on the floor as I'm trying to photograph this starfish to show people what it looked like. But it was just a hitchhiker that grew bigger and bigger, which was really neat. And I had it for a long time, and then one day I just didn't have it. I don't know what happened, but it was in the 280-gallon reef for years. These right here are a type of flatworm called an aeolid, and they are not negative. They're not pretty, okay? And I get why no one wants to look at them, but they're not detrimental to your system. They will eat the mucus off of corals like this LPS coral right here, or the mucus off of mushrooms. And while you may not want to see them, they're not doing any damage. But when you have thousands upon thousands in your tank, it's just ugly. So you would definitely want to siphon them out. You can also dip the coral in something, and you can use a turkey baster to blow them off and make these things fly loose into the water of the bucket. Right here are some candy cane corals, also called trumpet corals. They had these flatworms on them. This right here is not that flatworm. This is called red planaria, and I have a full article about how to treat your tank for red planaria. So if you want to learn more about that, they are a rust-colored flatworm that has 3 points on its butt. That's important to know because other flatworms, and there are different types of flatworms. Okay, you saw the ones in the first pictures; they were oval shaped. These things are squarish, but the tail end, the part that when the animal is moving forward, you can see the tail. You'll know which end's the tail as it moves. The front half that moves lifts its head up. It kind of looks like a parachute. And then it kind of grabs on and pulls itself forward. And it just keeps doing this. And the tail end has 3 points, or 3 sharp points. Those 3 points are really important because that way you know what you're dealing with. And here's another picture of them so you can see a little bit better. In that large one in the upper right, you can see the 3 points. And at the other end, you can see the curved part. That curved part, again, is the balloony part that uses to like latch on and pull forward, and then latch on and pull forward, and keep doing that. So these guys here are... First of all, they're ugly. Number two, they propagate themselves like crazy and to epic proportion. These were inside inside a refugium, not my refugium. And the problem is that when these things do die in your tank, they'll kill your other livestock. So that's a problem. So here's a picture of a small rock with some zoanthids in a dip solution, and you can see at the bottom is all these little specks. That's all the shriveled up flatworms that are dying. And this is not a one-time process. Now, if you bought a coral, and back in the day, you'd go to the fish store and you'd say, "Oh, look at these pretty corals! I want to buy this. I want to buy this." And the tank was filled with these flatworms. And I was really upset with the store that they continued to sell corals out of a tank infested with a pest that they knew they should resolve. And it's like, "Yeah, we're working on it." I was like, "No, you need to stop selling out of this tank until they're gone, because you're spreading this problem to all the hobbyists in the network, in the club, and of course people that were not members of the club." And so flatworms have to be removed, and red planaria are a really important one to remove. The other ones, you just don't want them in the tank. But these guys, as they're dying, like right now in this picture, as they're dying, they're releasing a toxin into the water that's akin to ammonia, and it causes a major spike, which causes fish to die. So that's why we want to make sure that we are treating them in a very specific way. So my article, I'm going to go into it right with you right now. I'm going to explain what I mean. But first of all, you want to remove them manually by siphoning with airline tubing. And this is an ongoing process that you will do for 2 weeks every single day to suck out as many as you possibly can out of the tank before you ever think about treating. And you might say, "But Mark, can I just take the coral out and dip it?" Yes, you totally can. But if these things are anywhere else in your tank, you need to remove them, because they're just going to make more of themselves, because they're like tribbles. And they gotta go. Now, a mandarin might eat them. A blue chromis might eat them. The velvet nudibranch definitely will eat them. It's this really cool black nudibranch with blue stripes on its body. It's gorgeous. I bought one from a club member specifically to eat them, because I wanted to get that on I want to say on film. I wanted to take a picture of it, and I wanted to, or maybe get some video of it. And I put it in my little tiny 20-gallon tank and never saw it again. And I was really sad, because it was such a beautiful creature and I really wanted to see it in action. Flatworm exit's another product on the market you can use, and which you should use to get rid of red planaria. But the important part is the siphoning. So, not that one. Not that one, my mistake. This one here. So here's the thing. You've got red planaria in your tank. You've identified it because they're rust colored. They're thin, like two-dimensional animals. They got the 3 points on the tail. Now you've got your airline tubing, and you're siphoning them out. Into what? Well, I would say grab a 5-gallon bucket and put it there by your feet and run a long piece of tubing from the tank all the way down into the bucket, right? So you probably need like a 5-foot piece of tubing. And then if you want, you can take a rigid piece of airline tubing and jam it into the flexible tubing. So now you have like a wand or a pointer stick, and you will just go and you'll sneak up on all of them and just slurp, slurp, slurp. It's really important that you're not aggressively trying to stab them. You are trying to siphon them out, because if they start dying in the tank, it can cascade into a trigger event where they all start dying. And we want to sneak them out of the tank. So you're going to go through and you're going to siphon, 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 and you're going to do it until you can't even see them anymore. It would be great if you could get a second person, like if you have kids, help me find these, and they'll say, "There's one, and you just keep following wherever your spotter finds you more, and you siphon out as many as you can. And that's usually like 20 minutes, and then you're fed up, right? You're like, "Okay, I can't find any more. That's enough for today." Tomorrow, you do it again. And the crazy thing is, tomorrow you look, there's just as many as what you saw yesterday. It's insane. If you see a few, there's hundreds. And if you sucked out hundreds, there's thousands behind that. That's the thing about red planaria. So we're siphoning them out every single day, day after day, for about 2 weeks, until you really think you've gotten 90% out of the tank. 95% would be even better. Then you're ready to treat your tank with flatworm exit. The reason we're trying to get out as many as possible is when you use the product to kill them, you're only going to kill a few, and as those few die and they release their toxins, it's not a compound of hundreds and thousands of flatworms dying. Instead, we have a few hundred dying, and that is much safer for your system. Now, this is a really, really important thing. You know, a lot of people look at this stuff like, oh, I'll just put the stuff in there, boom, 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 it goes away. This one is a very serious one. So when you're siphoning them out, you're getting rid of the bulk, right? And you put the product in on the day it's time to put them in. First thing you do is turn off the skimmer. You turn off any carbon. You clean out the carbon reactor. You refill it with fresh carbon, and you set it on the tank, but you don't turn it on yet, okay? Then you treat the tank with the product, and we want to kill the flatworms. And as the flatworms die, they will literally put out like a string that goes off into the water column. And it's the craziest thing. I saw this happen over and over and over. There would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up the string, like kites on a string. It's the neatest thing. And I would grab my tubing and I'd siphon those little guys out, and I'd siphon any as they're writhing, you know, as they're dying. I'm removing them from the tank as quickly as possible to get them out of my system because I want to remove their toxin. Within 15 minutes, you want to do a big water change on the tank immediately. And you want to, as soon as you get the water in the tank, this is a quick 5-minute water change, okay? We're not messing around here. And then you get the carbon on the tank immediately. And this should not be a bag of carbon sitting on the bottom in the compartment at the back of your tank. This needs to be a carbon reactor where water's flowing through the carbon back into the tank. Very, very important. If you do all of that, you won't lose any livestock. If you don't do what I said, you will lose livestock. So it's really important to do this the right way. Please do read my flatworm article on my website. It's real easy. Go to Google, type in Miller's Reef, red planaria, boom, it'll take you to my article, and you can just read the whole thing top to bottom so you're fully informed before you start. And that way you can actually eliminate these things. Now, I will also mention there's another step. Besides everything we just described, you have to do it 3 weeks in a row. So you do all the siphoning out for 2 weeks, and now you treat, and then 7 days from now you treat, and then 7 days from now you treat again. And at this point, you should be flatworm free. Now, we had such a problematic red planaria problem. Man, I said it over and over in this area that I kept flatworm exit in my glove box of my car. And I go buy a coral at the fish store, and I would open the bag of my car, and I'd put in 2 or 3 drops, and then I would close the bag and put it in my cooler and drive home. So it's sitting in the chemical for the entire drive, which is 15, 20 minutes. And then when I came home, I could take the coral out of there, I could put it in a bucket of water, and I could blow it off and remove the flatworms, because I didn't want any flatworms to get into my tank whatsoever, or even into my quarantine tank. I just wanted to kill them right in the bag. One more thing I can tell you off the top of my head, that red planaria can be resistant to the flatworm exit product. So one of the best ways to test its efficacy is to take a small container, some glass container where you can see, you put in a few flatworms, and then you put in 1 drop of flatworm exit and you stir with some kind of a plastic spoon and see if the flatworm reacts. If it doesn't, put in another drop and you stir again, and then 3 drops. You just put in as many drops as it takes to make the flatworm start to clearly implode. That's the best way of saying it. And once you know how many drops per gallon you needed, that container, that glass container I'm talking about, ideally it's a gallon of water. If it's lesser than that, you're going to have to figure out, you really need to know how many drops per gallon, so you're going to have to use a gallon container. But then when it's time to treat the tank, you know what strength you need to use in the tank to kill them. Because if you just put in like the directions of like 1 drop per gallon and nothing happens, you're like, well, it doesn't work for me. It's like, yeah, it's the wrong strength, because these things are slightly impervious to your medication. So we want to find out how many drops per gallon you need. And so you have to do this test next to the tank. And that is actually something that Salifert told us to do back in the day, because they're the ones that make this product. Salifert makes flatworm exit. And I think mine were pretty resistant to this stuff. I probably was using 4 or 5 drops per gallon, but that wasn't necessarily what was recommended in the first place. So you have to find out what works right for your flatworms to get rid of them. Okay? I know that was really long. This was another method I used for siphoning them out. Again, I was sneaking them out of the tank. So remember I said you can just put a bucket near the tank? Well, I was doing something even, and here's the thing, when you're using airline tubing, you can siphon for 20 minutes and you might only take out 1 gallon of water. If you use larger tubing, you're going to draw out more water and waste more water rapidly, where we just want to, remove flatworms, and they're little tiny things that will totally go up this tubing perfectly. So what I was doing at one point, because I was sneaking up on them, I would put a bag on the other end and throw it down in the sump. So as I'm siphoning out flatworms, the water would just drain out of the mesh bag back into the sump, but I wasn't killing them. There are other people that are way more aggressive and they're stabbing at them and they're killing them. And then they're dying in the bag, in the sump, affecting the reef. And we don't want to do that. So if you can't do it cautiously, like I'm recommending, then just have it drain straight into a separate bucket that you're going to pour down the toilet, okay? I will tell you this, when the mesh bag was then taken to the sink to rinse it clean of all these flatworms, and as soon as they hit fresh water, they all just imploded, they exploded, whatever you want to call it, and they all turned bright orange. So that rust color, that went everywhere. It was really neat. Now, after all that talk about flatworms, here's a type of flatworm you might see in your tank that's totally benign. These are beige or opaque looking. They have 2 points on the tail, not 3. And they do no harm. If you see them, they're just cool to look at. Don't fret, don't worry, don't panic. Odds are a few weeks from now you won't be able to find it. It's just a temporary little guy that snuck in and doesn't stick around long. You can see the big bell I was talking about, the part, I'm trying to think of like when a parachuter runs to the ground and they grab their parachute and they pull it down, it kind of has that big mushroom shape. That's what the mouth end looks like. There are giant flatworms in the ocean that put this big thing, this big mouth-like thing over their prey and consume it. But this thing here, it just seemed to like film algae off the glass of the refugium zone. Here's another type of flatworm, and this one here can be 6 to 8 inches long, 2 inches wide. It literally looks like the top of a clam's mantle, and that's intentional. It's designed, it's designed to climb on top of a clam and just sit there and eat the clam and then crawl away, and you have an empty shell. This flatworm also can eat snails. It can eat hermit crabs. Whatever it goes over the top of, it can consume what's underneath it. And a lot of times in big tanks, like mine, big 400-gallon systems, you'll find these things living in the overflow boxes that are in total darkness. And these guys never show themselves. But then you look down, and I found several in giant overflow boxes of huge reefs. It was really weird. I remember one time I came across one in my 280-gallon tank in the overflow. And so I said, okay, I've got a plan. I am going to siphon it out of my tank because it's so big. And so I had 1-inch hose, and it was a vinyl tubing, and I had a trash can outside, but I was like, you know what? Yeah, so I brought the trash can inside, and I just stuck the tube down inside the overflow box, and I I started the siphon, which was hard to do in 1-inch tubing. Trust me, a lot of suction. And then I was able to slurp the thing out, and because it sensed my presence, it kind of tried to hold on, and so I got most of it, but there was a piece it left behind. I had to siphon the piece out too into the trash can to get rid of it. Someone later on came to me and said, hey, Mark, I found this, and I left it on your front porch. I'm like, what do you mean? And I opened my front door, and there was a bucket with this flatworm. I was like, okay. So I took a few more pictures of it. This is the bottom side of it with the gonads. They can reproduce, make more of themselves in your system. You definitely don't want them because they are eating your cleanup crew. And that's why you find all these empty shells in the overflow box. It isn't that they went there and starved to death, because this thing ate them right out of their homes. And they don't eat the shell. They eat the worm, the slug part that's inside, and there's just shells left behind. And you have this graveyard of empty shells, and this guy here just grows bigger and bigger. Mantis shrimp, there are a couple of types that we're familiar with. The green ones tend to be hitchhikers. They come in on live rock from Florida. Sometimes you might get one in a coral. It might only be this big little tiny thing, but they can grow larger. You might discover one in your reef one day, just accidentally. Like I was at a friend's house. I was looking at Ryan's reef. I'm like, hey, you got a mantis shrimp. He's like, ha, that's funny. And I was like, no, seriously, look right there. And the little thing was just running in a circle around a coral. I mean, I don't even know what it was doing. It was just doing laps. It was the craziest thing. And he was like, oh my God, there's a mantis shrimp in my reef. So the peacock mantis is beautiful. They are very large animals, and some people like to keep them. But if you're going to keep this animal, if you say, okay, it's a cool thing, it is a pest, but I like it, you can't keep it in your tank because it's going to kill things in your tank you love, like fish, and it'll split open shells of snails and eat your cleanup crew again. So instead, it'd be better to be in a species-only tank where it's by itself or with a few things that you want it to have, but you will then be giving it prey for it to eat to continue to live. Be very careful when trying to remove one from a tank. If anything, you want to catch it like in a fish trap or something with a door, because there's two kinds, and one is a piercer that spears, and then one is a puncher that is the equivalent of getting hit with a 22 round bullet. So you don't want to get punched and you don't want to get speared. So be very careful removing it. There's a chance you might get it to go into a PVC pipe, for example, and then you can put something hard over the opening really quickly, lift the pipe out, and put it into its new home. But yeah, it's not recommended for a reef tank. This right here is a digitate hydroid. Oh man, I was hoping that was a video. So anyway, it's a tendril that comes out of the rock, and it's got all these little like white appendages. And the funny thing is it kind of does this jerking thing. I don't know what it's doing. I don't know. I assume it's trying to lure something toward it, but there's nothing to lure. So I don't know what it was doing. Maybe it was just trying to hopefully catch particulates of food blown around in the tank. Ron Shemek says it's bad. I had them in my tank. I thought it was a cool little thing. I enjoyed looking at it live its life, and it didn't do any harm to anything in my tank. They can sometimes, I don't know if they're related to leather corals, if they embed themselves in leather corals, if they like to irritate leather corals, but there's something about digitate hydroids and leather corals. So that's all I can tell you, but mine was awesome. I liked it. I had 2 or 3. But I guess if you had hundreds and hundreds, it might be a bad thing. Montipora eating nudibranchs are little nudibranchs that eat the skin right off of a Montipora colony. And they are, I have a bunch of pictures of these, but that was just a picture of 2 of them on the underside of a coral skeleton next to a Swiss Army knife. And right here, this is a crappy picture, but there's a whole cluster of them. But then as you look to the right, like in the middle of the picture, and then you look to the far right, those are all the babies. And it just lays tons and tons of these things, and they will just consume your Montipora species. Now, in this one photograph you're looking, you might say, oh yeah, I see 1 or 2. No, there's 5 on that picture right there. And there's a whole bunch of babies ready to hatch and emerge. And what they do is they lay their eggs typically right at the margin between life, living tissue, and the dead skeleton, so that as soon as they emerge straight on their meal, and they start to consume it. This one photograph here, you can see an adult, and then underneath you can see all the babies, little tiny dots. And one guy, again, people used to leave buckets of things on my front porch, and this one guy gave me a bucket full of Montipora covered in these. And I had this one frag tank sitting in my back room unused. It just had water running in it. I had nothing going on. So I said, okay, I'll put them in there. I'm going to eradicate these things. I'm going to find out what it's going to take to remove them. And I couldn't. I did some research, and this at the time, we had people like Eric Borneman writing articles on this topic, and he was saying that potassium permanganate would work to kill them, but it also killed the coral, so it wasn't really an effective cure, was it? In this one photograph, if you look right above that adult, you can see where the skin of the coral is basically, it's being consumed, but it kind of looks like RTN, like the skin is just peeling off. It's because it's being chomped off by these little bastards. So we want to get rid of them. And this was another weird thing. It seemed like wherever I saw 2 of them come together, like they got together to kiss, when they dispersed, there was more babies. And I ended up taking every bit of it and throwing it all away and sanitizing the frag system because it was pointless. There was nothing I could save. When it comes to these things, the only solution is to cut away the dead area with the infestation and save the purely clean, 100% non-infected coral and put that back in your tank. You just have to get rid of the bulk of it and just save a good piece to start with to start anew. These things are very hardy, and they are visible. They're not invisible to the eye. It's not one of those things where you couldn't see it. You can see them do the damage. You can see the bite marks. You can see the babies. I mean, all these photographs here were not like crazy zooms. And then right here, I was at a frag swap in Rochester, New York, and I was giving a presentation that day, and then I went to look in the tank, and I'm looking at this Montipora, and right there at the bottom, right under the middle of the picture there at the bottom, is a Montipora eating nudibranch that comes with the Montipora, which is just like a guaranteed way to get somebody to come back and buy more of your corals because I've given you the thing that's going to eat it right out of your tank. I'm joking. He didn't do it on purpose. I just happened to spot it, took the picture, and warned him, you have a pest right there. You should get rid of that. You can try different dips. You can try blowing it off with a turkey baster, but really just cut off all the affected area, save the good part, or just get rid of it entirely. And don't run Montipora in your tank for 6 months or so until their food source is completely gone. And anything that might have still been in your system will starve to death and just dissipate. They'll just disappear. And then you can start putting in Montes again. But always inspect your brand new Montipora colonies for any kind of pest, especially the Montipora eating nudibranch. How are we doing on time? Let me see. Oh, we're already an hour in. Okay, so we have tons of slides to go. Maybe I should continue this next week. This is a barnacle. A lot of times barnacles will show up inside torch corals, and torch keepers hate them. They're like, oh, it's bad, you must destroy it, it's going to kill your torch. Barnacles are not destructive animals. They are filter feeders. They will find a spot in the coral that they will call home. They bore a hole, I guess, but that's it. They don't eat the coral. They don't harm the coral. They're inside the skeleton of the coral, the same skeleton the coral is using, and it emerges this beautiful fan that captures particulates of food from the water column and just pulls it in, licks it off, and sticks it out again. That's all it does. But some people are just adamant you must destroy all barnacles. I say it's a good guy. Ultimately, it's your choice. I like diversity of life in my aquariums, and if there's nothing negative about it, I'm going to let it live. But I'm sure a bunch of torch-loving people want to, get their torches and pitchforks and come after me for saying that. This right here appears on the glass of new aquariums, especially if you set up a tank with live sand. And you'll suddenly see these little tiny snowflakes, and they don't look nearly as good as this photograph. This photograph was taken by somebody back in the day, and it was like so beautiful. I was like, I need it for this presentation, and he gave it to me. But this is a jellyfish that doesn't swim. It grabs onto the glass. And when I set up my 400-gallon back in 2011, I put in live sand and dry sand in the tank, added salt water, and my glass was covered in these little white snowflakes everywhere. They're so neat. And the funny part was I'd take the cleaning magnet and I would clean the glass, and they'd all go flying off. And within 30 seconds, they were right back on the glass again, like zoop, like magnets. It was really neat. They're beautiful. They're neat. They don't do any harm, and they just evaporate in a few days, and you just don't have them anymore. So if you happen to see something like this on your glass, don't be scared of it. Don't think, oh no, it's going to kill my tank. Enjoy the life for what it is, and take a good picture if you can, and then realize in a few days you're not going to see it because we are not providing the right food to keep it alive, clearly. But it's a neat critter. Okay, this is a stomatella snail. Lots of people post this picture. They're like, what is this thing? And it's a slug that has a shell that kind of looks like your thumbnail on the top of one end. And if you were to try to remove it by hand, you might actually rip off the tail accidentally. The tail, while you can throw it back in the reef, will not grow another stomatella. But the front half, with the head and the shell, that can grow a new tail. So this is a great algae grazer. They're very nocturnal. And if your tank is filled with them, be glad. They're awesome. For the people that like to keep wrasses will pick them off. That's why they come out at night while the fish are asleep, because it's safe to do their thing. But stomatellas come in a few different colors. There's black ones. There's this tan one. There might be a green tinge to it. That one picture on the right by a guy that went by Zimina, that was his daughter's name. He did this beautiful photography, and I was like, oh, I need that picture. And you can really see the creature. It's really cool. This right here just came up on Facebook. This guy said, what is this? And everyone's like, I think it's this, I think it's that. And of course, people were just guessing. And when I first saw it, I was like, what on earth is that? So this little thing, it's oval shaped, but it has like a hard shell that comes up like a pyramid on its back. So you've got this pyramid that's running around the tank, and it's like ding, 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 ding. It's super crazy fast. It's a sand skater. And at the time it came in on a coral, I was dipping it, and I saw these things come flying off. I was like, oh, that's so cool. So I took pictures of it, and I wrote Ron Shemek and said, do you know what this is? And he says, it's a sand skater. I was like, oh, okay, cool. He says, they're totally fine. I was like, oh, I killed him in the dip. So not everything that we dip off of our corals is a bad guy, and not everything has to be murdered. And this would have been a really cool bug to have running around in your tank and doing its thing. So if you come across a sand skater, don't be scared of it. This one right here was on the glass at the fish store. Again, I was up there with my camera. I was like, oh my God, I know exactly what that is. And he was like, what is it? I've never seen it before. I said, that thing comes off your star polyps. You have pink star polyps in the tank, and this thing is pink. It literally blends in to look like star polyps, and it will eat them. So, and there's different colors of the exact same thing that consume them. So, if you come across one of these things, if you don't like star polyps, this is your friend, because it'll eat them. If you do like green star polyps or pink star polyps or neon star polyps, then if you catch one of these guys walking around, you should remove it from the tank because it's going to decimate your colony. There was a guy on Reef Central, he had hundreds and hundreds of them, and it was so funny because he didn't know, he had no idea. He made a post and he said, hey, do you guys have any corals that walk around? Because they're walking all over the place. I've never seen a coral do this before. And it was so funny because all the comments, one after the next, were like, I'll take it, I'll take it, I'll take it, send me one, how much, I'll take it, sell me some, I need these. Because no one wants star polyps in their tank. Some people do. Some people don't. They're a softy coral, they grow very fast, they cover over everything you own, so they can be detrimental. And so those guys that have tanks just packed with star polyps would love these nudibranchs to come in there and cull the harvest, get it under control. But anyway, it's a cool little critter. This one, I wanted it so bad. So this one eats sun corals. It's another nudibranch. And I was like, oh man, it's so beautiful. I mean, look at the color. Well, it's that color because it eats sun corals, and sun corals are beautiful. And the guy was in Dallas. He goes, yeah, sure, Mark, come get it. And the only reason I wanted to get it was to take pictures of it. But then I had to ask myself, am I really going to drive an hour each way to get this nudibranch and then spend the rest of my life buying it sun corals to eat? And I decided, no, not going to do it. Forget it. So here is a picture in his tank. You can see an Aptasia down at the bottom there of that upper picture. And then where the arrow's pointing, that is the nudibranch that is blending in with the polyps that are kind of open. Now, when you're trying to find a nudibranch in your tank, whether it's on zoanthids or it's on star polyps or it's on sun corals, if you take a turkey baster and you blow the coral so the polyps will close, the nudibranch can't close up. So that's a great way to discover them in your tank so that you can remove them. And you would remove them with tweezers or siphon or the turkey baster to slurp it off the coral colony. Vermitids, as someone mentioned earlier, a vermitid problem in their tank. Vermitids, and I have them in my system, and I've got these Texas-sized ones that grow these huge, massive shells in my sump, in my overflow box, they're in my tank as well. I've been doing some removal, but not nearly, I've not been systematically just removing them like I should. And I had a few, and I was like, whatever, I don't care. It's a worm that's eating some food from the water column. But the thing is that the web they throw out, they cast this huge web. It's usually a few strings. But when they do it, the web lands on whatever. And so, for example, you've got this worm right here, and then it throws this web that away, and there's corals right here. Well, the web is irritating that coral. So even though the worm isn't eating the coral at all, the web, what the web is made of, it's irritating and harming the coral every single time it throws the web. And when does it throw the web? Anytime there's a chance to eat. So whenever you throw food in the water, the webs come out. You're kicking up the sand bed, the webs come out. Marine snow is using the tank, the webs come out. And these webs are irritating the coral to where it damages the coral. So it's better not to let those webs touch. And the web is going the direction of the flow in the tank. So if you have a worm here and the flow is blowing this way, obviously the web's going to go that way. It can't push the web into the flow. You can't do it. It doesn't have control of the web. It's just throwing it. It's not like Spider-Man where it aims for a certain spot and hits the mark. So this right here would be a worm that you do need to remove from the system. And so you would snap off the shell and possibly close the hole with some super glue gel so it dies inside its home. That is one approach. The other is to remove the thing entirely, which is tricky. I mean, it's hard to do that because what you're doing is you're trying to break off the entire colony, not just the tube. Now, the tube is made of calcified material that it made. This thing comes in as a tiny little hitchhiker, and it just keeps making its own tube. The tube gets longer and longer, so it can get a better spot to cast from. And yeah, you just need to make sure that you remove them from the system. Richard Ross was using a dental tool in his tank, and he was, reaching down under the bottom part of his reef and trying to break off the entire thing so the entire enclosure came off the rock so he could remove it. It's not an easy thing to do. Also, if you're using check valves, vermitids love to live inside check valves because that's where all the water goes through all the time, and all the food and all the fish waste. All of that goes through the check valve. And the problem is that that tube that you saw that's so hard will block the check valve door from coming down. So it'll come down part of the way, but not all the way, and your tank will continue to drain instead of doing what the check valve is supposed to do, which is to stop the water from draining to keep your sump from overflowing. So you do need to inspect your check valves regularly, every few months, every 6 months at minimum, because if there are any in there, they're going to be a problem for flooding your home. If you can remove the check valve and put a different one that's clean in there, that's even better, like a couple of unions above and below. Then you can just take the one that was dirty, you can soak it in vinegar or citric acid or whatever you want, and you can scrape out all the vermitids, and then you have a clean one that's just doing its job. All right. Pyramidellid snails are a type of snail that will get onto the side of a clam. Here's a sense of scale against a dime. And this is them inside a groove of a snail, and that part, of a clam. And on the left part of that photograph, that purplish part, that's the mantle of the clam. So you can see how tiny they can be. They can be really, really small, but they can also grow to be a large enough one to where you can totally recognize them. Like I did here at the fish store. I could see them right there in the scutes of this maxima, and the easiest way to remove them is a toothpick. And you just flick them out and get rid of them. But you would have to remove the clam from the water and put it over a paper towel or something, and you're just removing these little snails because they are going to bore a hole right through the snail to get to the clam meat. A 6-line wrasse can eat them. Same with the yellow coarse wrasse, but it's just easier. Just remove them. Just get it. Just do it. Be done. Whelks are a type of snail that sometimes gets sold to us as Nassarius snails. They look similar, but they're different. And this one here is a predatory whelk that eats meat. So it's going to eat other snails. And so that's why we don't like them. Their foot, the part that comes out, that trails them as they're walking forward, will look tattooed, as will their snout. And here is a picture on the top. The one on the left is a Nassarius. The one on the right is a whelk. And if you look closely at the... let me see. Can I zoom this? I cannot, can I? Oh, I can. So there is the Nassarius tube. And then here is the whelk tube. See the difference? And then in the lower part of that, you can see all these little ones. And they're really small. So what I had, so here's the thing. I had a guy says, Mark, I'm going to give you a gold Maxima clam. I think it'll do great in your 55-gallon reef. You've got metal halides. I was like, wow, that's really nice of you. And he shipped it to me. And I put it in my tank thinking nothing of it, just excited to have a new clam. And the next day I had an empty clamshell with about a dozen of these whelks in there just eating the clam. And I told the guy, I'm so sorry. And he was really mad at me. He goes, I would never send it to you if you told me you had whelks. I was like, I didn't know I had whelks. I thought I had Nassarius. I just have these snails in the rockwork. So I felt bad. The clam was dead. And I spent the next few weeks using a flashlight at night. And I just go over the rockwork every single night looking. And if I found one, grabbed my forceps, removed it, went to the backyard and threw it in the grass. And I just kept pulling out as many as I possibly could until I had none left. Nassarius snails are good. Don't throw away Nassarius snails. You throw away the whelk. Another thing you'll notice about the two shells there in that top picture, and we'll make this big again, I think. Let's see if I can do this up. I tilted it. Looking at side by side, the one on the right it's black. The tail kind of comes to a point of the shell, and there's white splotches. Nassarius never have that look. So that's super. The tattoo on the snout and on the tail, and the shell being that black with white splotches is a great clue. Nassarius tend to be more of a greenish color. Their snout is not nearly as tattooed in comparison, like I said. Again, we're looking at that one more time. So anyway, just wanted to show you that. All right, let's see if we can go to the next slide somehow. I killed it. Come back, come back. Not now. All right, Let's try this again. All right. So yeah, I said remove them at night. This right here is an orange ball anemone, and it is just a good guy. It's just a little tiny anemone that lives down within your rockwork. You might see them living under the rock. You know, you're taking a flashlight at night, and you see this beautiful thing, and it's completely clear, but the tip of every single ball is orange. Ball anemones are in the mushroom family, even though they look like an anemone way more than they look like a mushroom. And they're cool. They're neat. They don't do any harm. In this particular spot, you're looking at a bunch of zoanthids that are closed up. I took the picture at night with a flash because the critter was open. And then during the daytime, it's closed and all the zoanthids are open. So it's like you got this neat thing to look at night. And my tanks in the past all had some. I wouldn't say they're in all of them, but I guarantee you there's some in my 400 gallon to this day. These right here are those little white dots you see on the back glass of your tank, on your overflow box. You're like, what are these things? Are they bad? And so I decided to take some really good pictures. So the lower picture is kind of a decent photograph of the little tiny white dot. It's actually a shape like a shell, and it's a spirorbid worm. And then that upper picture, upper right, that was me with my macro lens with the flow off. And I was like, look at the texture of that thing. It's crazy. And it puts out this really pretty like feather duster crown, again, to filter feed. They do zero harm in your tank. They're absolutely benign. They're cool. They're proof of life. They're a good thing. If you don't like looking at them because they're white dots, you can take a credit card and just scrape the back to knock them off, and they'll just adhere somewhere else. You'll find them all over your rock work. You'll find them on your plumbing. I mean, they go everywhere. And they do no harm, so they're nothing to be fearful of. Here is a whole bunch of them on a piece of black acrylic. And I see hydroids on there as well. But those things, I mean, look how pretty they are. They're really, really cool. Red bugs. Dumbest name ever. Someone called them red bugs, and they have been called that ever since. But they're yellow. They have a red dot on their butt. They should be called red butt bugs or something like that. Anyway, red bugs are little tiny fleas that chew on and irritate acropora colonies. That first picture you saw was from a friend of mine who did a great job. This is more like what you're going to see, or even less than this. I mean, there's a lot on this one infested branch, right? You know, there's probably 50 on that spot right there. But usually it was like 10 or 3, or just a few. But the coral will tell you it's infested by the way it's acting. It's not putting out its polyps because it's got fleas walking all over its skin and it's irritated. It doesn't like, and it's being bit by these fleas. So here again, I was trying to take really good macro shots with my lens. Nothing like that first picture you saw where you could see the yellow animal with a red dot. These don't look red at all, right? They're yellow. But these things are all over the coral, and so I had to treat them to get rid of them. And here's a coral that is completely closed up. I mean, there's a few polyps at the very top that are opened up, but most of it is pale. It is miserable. It's just not doing well because of the red bug infestation. This was a granulosa I had in my tank, and it had red bugs on it as well. And so I treated it with Interceptor. The same stuff that Joe used in his 20,000 gallon reef that I told you was half of a sugar packet. It's one of these tablets. So the way you get this in the past, you go to your vet and you say, I need this for my reef tank. And they're like, no, this is made for dogs. And then you have to say, it's for my dogfish. You just have to, if you have a vet, this is a lot easier because they understand what you're doing and you are trying to take care of your animals. My own vet would sell it to me, but I had to give her a picture of my aquarium that she could staple to my sign-in sheet, my patient file, so that way she could say this is the patient and the medication went to this patient. So this one tablet for a large dog, rated for 51 to 100-pound dogs, of Interceptor, you would smash it with a spoon to turn it into powder, and then you would use X amount of scoops based on the water volume you're going to treat. Now, one tablet treats 400 gallons, so that's pretty easy math. Half of a tablet would do 200 gallons. A quarter of a tablet would do 100 gallons. It's that kind of math, right? Now, when I was using this little tiny Salifer testing scoop, like for a test kit, I was putting a tiny scoop in my quarantine tank that had 14 gallons of water. So I could take one tablet, smash it down, and keep it in a covered vial to keep it dry and safe. And then I'd open the vial, take out a little tiny scoop, put that in the quarantine tank to kill any red bugs on a new coral that I'd acquired, and then close the vial and put it aside till next time. And I just did that whenever I got new corals. It was the simplest solution. But when you're treating a tank, you're going to have to, turn off UV, turn off the skimmer, turn off any carbon. Don't run any ozone. Smash up the stuff, mix it up in a cup of tank water, pour it into the reef, and it's going to kill all the fleas. It will also kill your hermit crabs, and it will kill your ornamental shrimp. So if you have cleaner shrimp, blood shrimp, coral banded shrimp, peppermint shrimp, all those have to be removed from the tank first because this medication will kill them. And it will also kill your pod population. But look at the difference of this one coral before and after. Which do you prefer? Do you want the coral all closed up and miserable, or do you want the fluffy, hairy-looking coral? Well, to get rid of the fleas, you have to sacrifice. So in my case, I removed all the hermits. It was really easy. I'd put food in the tank, and the hermits all come running out, and I'd reach in the tank, and I'd pull them out one by one, and throw them in my quarantine tank where they were safe for the next few weeks. And then I'd try to catch all my ornamental shrimp, and I had this one cleaner shrimp. No. Yeah, I think it was a skunk cleaner shrimp, and I could not catch it. It just did not want to be caught. And I was just like, man, I want this out of the tank so I can treat. It's ridiculous. I got everything out of the tank except for this one shrimp. And it was a 280-gallon tank, so it wasn't like an easy feat. And finally, I was like, you know what? I don't care. This is on you, buddy. I tried to get you out. You wouldn't listen. So I mixed up my solution. I turned off all my filtration. I poured it in the tank. And then I walked around to the front to look. And there was that shrimp standing on top of my toadstool leather, like, get me out of here. And I put the net there, and it just walked into the net. And I put it in the quarantine tank. I was like, that was crazy. It's like, I was like, oh, now I see why you were getting everyone out of here. Let me get out too. And so I did not lose anything to the treatment. The treatment goes on weekly for 3 weeks. And again, the reason being we want to break the egg cycle. If there are any eggs in the system that are hatching and they're releasing more of the fleas, we want to then hit them again, and then we want to hit them again. And if you do this 3 weeks in a row, your tank will be red bug free. It is the easiest treatment of all the things we do to get rid of a pest. I love it. And if you are like, well, how do I get more pods in my tank? You buy new pods and you pour them in. That's all you got to do. So it's a real simple solution. It is, like I said, it's so easy. I just don't even blink an eye. You don't have to do a water change when you're done. There's nothing freaky going on. I talked to my vet about it, and she said after this medication has been inside salt water for 12 hours, it is inert. It is no longer a toxin, and so you don't have to worry about like running carbon to remove it or do a huge water change to remove this chemical, because we're killing fleas. And even if you had hundreds or thousands of fleas, they're fleas. And if you took all the thousands of fleas and put them into one thing, they'd probably be the size of this in your tank. I mean, just something really small. It's not a lot of mass, so it's not going to leave any problems in your tank. So anyway, it's a great way to get rid of these things. And so red bugs can be removed. And there's an article on my website, again, how to remove red bugs, that you can read. This is an isopod, which is similar to an amphipod, except it looks more like an ant. And the body is flat. The amphipod's kind of curved like a comma. And an isopod just is straight. This one was a new one for me about 10 years ago. I'd never heard of it. It's a spider that eats acropora. Who knew? And this was posted on Reef to Reef. I was like, oh my God, I need your picture for my presentation. And so he let me have it, which is really neat. So here's a not so great picture of it, but at least you kind of see what it is. And there are divers that go scuba diving. They do macro photography, and they'll get amazing pictures of these things. They do exist in the ocean too. It's not just a horrible pest that's trying to kill your reef. They are in nature, and there is something in nature that eats them that keeps the counterbalance so that they don't become an ocean full of spiders. Otherwise, none of you would ever swim again, right? This is an acropore eating flatworm. Remember we talked about the purple ones? I said not an acropore eating flatworm. This one is the true thing. And that's against a ruler. You can see the thing's about 2 millimeters long. It's a little tiny oval. It's kind of see-through. That's on purpose because it wants to lay on the skin of the coral and be invisible. And then that spot in that coral, in that picture right there you're looking, that brown spot is a cluster of eggs. Hundreds and hundreds of eggs that will all release more of these flatworms. And also in that same picture you're looking at, there are tons of bite marks all over the colony. So If your coral suddenly looks polka dotted, like a bunch of white dots, that's every one of those is a bite mark where the flatworm lay there and would suck the life out of the coral. This was a tricolor Veleta, which is a beautiful coral with purple tips. Look at that thing. It's beige. It has no color anymore because the flatworms sucked the coral right out of it. And as they suck it in, it helps them look like the coral to some degree to where they're invisible. So, and then in that upper left corner, or the center of this thing right there, you can see a micro brittle starfish next to an aquarium flatworm. So you can kind of see they aren't invisible, but they are really hard to see. And you can't just look in your tank and say, oh, I see one. No, you can see the eggs for sure. So here is another close-up of that same coral with the polka dotted bite marks. And there's that cluster of eggs, that brown patch. It's golden, honey colored, whatever. And then this is kind of a crappy picture. Watch my mouth. Of an acro that has been out of the water. And what it does in that spot, even with my glasses right there, right about there, you can see some eggs, little circular eggs. They're very rounded eggs. And then there's that weird looking, wrinkly looking sort of raisin thing that's a little bit lower down, about even with my mouth. Right about there, right there, straight across. And there's this wrinkly thing. That is the flatworm. So what this was, I think Ryan told me this one. Ryan Reeves said, if you take an acropore out into the sunlight and let it, dry off, not dry to die, but just so it's no longer wet, the flatworm will appear to be wet. So you'll see a shiny spot. That's our acroporean flatworm. The rest of the colony kind of looks matte. It looks kind of dry. Of course, you can submerge in water again and take care of whatever it is you're doing. But this coral right here would be a bad candidate to keep because of the eggs. Just the flatworms, you can blow them off with a turkey baster or a power head. You could try to peel them off with like a toothpick or something, just scrape them away. But the eggs, you have to scrape off every single egg. If you leave one egg behind, the problem continues. It persists. So in this case here, you can see that one spot in that top picture. It's just tons and tons of eggs. That whole thing would be thrown away. There's no benefit from keeping it. This lower picture, you can see an area. There's two areas. Actually, there's 3 areas of eggs in that photograph. And there's a person's thumb with their thumbnail to give you a sense of scale. So you're looking for very small eggs. Obviously, quarantine any new arrivals when it comes to corals. Inspect them carefully. Put them in all the different coral dips you want to use. But look for the eggs. That's really important. I'll tell you one more thing that worked for me in my tank, and I learned it from Joe Aiullo for the 20,000 gallon reef. And that was that we would, so here's what he did. He has a 20,000 gallon aquarium, and he's got corals infested with acroporean flatworms. And he went in with a garden hose with a squeezer thing, like you're going to water your garden. And it was that tubing that is from the garden hose he's holding. And he's in full dive gear, the mask, everything, right? And he's wearing the dive suit. He's in the 20,000 gallon reef. He's probably turned off the flow to the tank because I think that would be logical. And he's got the garden hose with the squeezer thing, and he is shooting the coral with RO water. And that floods the area because RO water is in salt water is sort of like oil and water. You see the RO bubble, it just kind of looks wavy and weird looking, sort of like the heat on a driveway on the highway when you're driving through the desert and you can see that heat on top way ahead. It's that kind of look, that fresh water inside the salt water. So he's flooding the coral with fresh water, and the acroporean flatworms just peel off. They're like, what happened? Where did the salt go? And they peel off. And then all of his fish would come eat the flatworms. It was a great system. Well, I can't do the garden hose of water because I don't have a 20,000 gallon reef. But I could take a turkey baster and I could squirt RO water onto a coral colony. And that was one method. But it really wasn't super effective, and it was a lot of turkey basting back and forth. More water, more water, more water. Again, the flow was turned off in the tank. I found a better system. And so what I did was I grabbed a MaxiJet power head, which is a small power head you can hold in your hand. And I ran a long extension cord to it so I could walk because the wire on that thing's like 6 feet. And I needed more distance because I have a 280 gallon tank. The plug is where it is, and I could only get so far with that single cord. So I got a longer cord. I held the power head in my hand, and I would go to the coral in question, and I would let the power head just blast the coral for like 20 seconds. I wouldn't even move my hand. I would just blast the spot nonstop. and then a flatworm come flying off, and my Anthias would dart out, gobble it up, and then park and watch me again as I made another one appear, and it came and ate it. So my lyre-tail Anthias and I worked as a team every single week, eating acropora-eating flatworms as I blew them off the coral. The Acropora valida I was talking about is the canary in the coal mine. It is the one Acropora that they like. It's their candy. They just love it. So if you are trying to find out if your tank has acropora-eating flatworms, put an Acropora valida in your tank, a tricolor acro, in the tank, and just keep an eye on it, because that is going to be your indicator that they have appeared, that they are present, that they are doing damage. And then, if you have a colony that's infested, you can cut off the tip that's still healthy and replant it and throw away the infested part. Okay? But my trick of just blowing them off the coral and letting my fish eat them was my solution. Worked really well. I did not take my tank apart. Now, I'm going to spend some time on this, and I realize I've been talking about it for a long time. But the thing is, lots of people will take the nuclear option. What I just described of using a power head is the most benign, easy way of doing something I can think of. But a lot of people would say, oh, the only way to get rid of these is to remove every acropora from your tank and put them in a separate tank and dip them every single week and make sure your tank has no acropora in it anywhere. And if there's any life behind, you scrape it off, you chisel it off the rock, you remove any acropora coral tissue from the tank for the next 6-8 weeks. Maybe even 12 weeks. That way, if there's any flatworms left in the system, they will starve to death and die. And then when you take your corals that you've been dipping week after week after week, you can put them back in the tank and you've solved the problem. The problem was lots of people tried this advice because they were told to do this and they thought, oh, okay, that sucks, but I'll do it. And they'd lose 80 to 90% of their corals because you're removing the coral from its habitat. You're putting it in a new tank with different flow and different lighting. Just, even if you had metal halide and metal halide, it's a different distance because you've got one flat tank versus a three-dimensional reef where you had a coral down here and a coral up here and a coral way up here. And this one had 600 par and this one had 150 par. Now they're all getting the same amount of par at the same height. They're all near each other. They weren't neighbors like that before. They were in a huge tank with lots of water. Now they're in a small tank with less water. You're dipping them in a chemical solution every week. So you're handling them with your hand. You're putting them in a chemical. You're rinsing them off. You're inspecting them. You're looking at them. You put them back in the tank. The stress slime is coming off of them. The stress slime goes to the next coral, the next coral, the next. It's just a constant, it's bad news. And while you might say, well, this is the only way I'll know. Was the damage that bad in your tank that you had to do the nuclear option? Or was it just you had a few colonies that were being infected or being badly affected, but everything else in your tank is fine? Rather than just ransacking your reef with this crazy over the top, and I told everyone stop doing this, and no one listened to me. They all just kept saying, this is what you have to do. It's the only way. I had them in my tank. I got rid of them, and my tank never knew. I mean, I didn't lose anything. And I didn't have 80 to 90% of my favorite corals die because I was manhandling them week after week after week. It's just too much. And think about it. A coral is a biome. It's got life within it. It's got life on it. It's got the symbiotic algae within it. It's got a whole gastric system. It's got a whole chemical composition to make more coral skeleton to grow. It's got a defense mechanism. It's got polyps that had to extend and retract. All of that is energy. And also, the corals that are sitting in that frag tank are not getting fed like they were being fed before in the reef tank with all the fish that you're feeding. Because you're feeding the fish, they're pooping all over the corals. The fish poop is a food source for the corals. No, these guys are going through all this craziness and all these water changes and being put in a chemical dip that keeps killing off bacteria every single dip. No wonder they're bleaching out, they're retracting, they refuse to open anymore, they're just fed up. It's a bad approach. I don't recommend that at all. Try the flooding with fresh water first. Try the power head method. It's so much better. Even if you can't blow it off and have a fish eat the flatworm, which they should. I mean, it's a source of food. And with the blowing around the water column, it's way easier for a fish to gulp it up than it is to go chew on a coral and get to the flatworm that's down deep in the branches, right? If you can't capture it that way. You might be able to capture it with a helper, with a net, or with a turkey baster. Just slurp it up because it's blowing around in the tank, you know. But just removing them from the system is what you want to do, but we don't want to lose our corals in the process. So that was a big, long speech, but I just feel like that's an important one to talk about. Oh, and also, like before, oh, what was that? Stop. There's an article on my website about acropora eating flatworms. Now that link I know is not right, but you can again go to Google, type in melevsreef.com/ or just melevsreef and AEFW, and it'll take you right to my article. Zoanthid nudibranchs eat zoanthids, and like I mentioned earlier with the ones that eat sun corals, they're visible if you turkey base the coral closes up, and then these guys stand out like a sore thumb. They will eat zoanthids, and they will become the color of the zoanthid to the point that they blend in so beautifully. And there's tons and tons of nudibranchs in the ocean. It's insane. I forget the number, but it was something insane, like 800 species. I'm like, what? We're familiar with maybe 6 in our tanks. But anyway, these things do eat zoanthids. They can lay their babies on zoanthids. They'll do spirals, and the spirals will hatch to be more, which we don't want. Because then you end up with this many in your tank. And that right there is probably 20 that someone was able to find in their tank and remove. And that is the egg cluster you might see on the side of a zoanthid polyp. That came from zoanthid eating nudibranchs. You can scrape these eggs off, by the way. That's one you can do. The seagrass wrasse, it's a green fish, does eat them, but very few people buy that wrasse. You can use a Lugel's dip to remove nudibranchs from a coral that you can remove from the tank. You obviously could not use Lugel's. Lugel's is just a very concentrated iodine. Using a coral dip can't be used in the aquarium, but you can remove a coral from the aquarium to dip it, like if you have a small zoanthid rock. But again, if you put a whole rock in the dip solution, anything that was alive on the rock will die in the dip solution, and now you're putting the rock with possible chemical. What am I trying to say? The chemicals are now in the pores of the rock, and you put the rock back in your tank, and the chemicals are now in your tank. So we don't want to do that. So it's better with like frag plugs, where it's just a plug. Those are pretty dense. They're not porous like our live rock is, or our dry rock. So it's better to just like manual removal is the best. And you can use tweezers to remove them. You can use a turkey baster to slurp it out. Do not squish it with your finger. So this is another crazy story. A guy had a small tank, sort of like my little Smolin one over here. Maybe he had like a 5-gallon tank on his desk in his office. And he's on the phone. Think of him at Dunder Mifflin, and he's selling paper, right? And he sees his nudibranch on the front glass. And he just reaches in while he's on the phone. So you want 10 cases or 12 cases. And he reaches in the tank, and he just smashes it against the glass. He just crushes it. Like, I'm just killing this weird bug that's in my tank that I don't want, that doesn't belong. They took him out on a gurney to the hospital because when he squished it, it got into his bloodstream, and he ended up getting a allergic reaction, basically, at the very least. So anaphylactic shock is what I'm trying to think of. You don't want to squish nudibranchs, period. Just siphon them out, throw them away. This amazing picture was taken by my friend Amy years ago. It is another weird... Oops, sorry. Should show you what I'm showing you. It's a spider, another spider. And she took this picture, and it looks like something right out of a horror movie. Or like Alien or something, right? I mean, it's got these long, like, hook-like talons on all 8 legs. It's crazy. And it likes to live on the coral and lay its eggs like the other one we showed earlier. And here's the one I found. Didn't look nearly as fantastic as her picture, but it's still a bad spider to have, and you don't want to have that thing in your tank. So if you do see them, the best solution, and that's right there on the head of a pally, is take all the zoanthids out of your tank and put them in a temporary quarantine tank for the next 90 days, and every single night you go with a flashlight and you look for spiders. And you remove any spiders with tweezers every single time. until you can't find spiders anymore. And after 90 days or so, you have a spider-free collection of zoanthids. You can now move them back into your aquarium where they were. Now, this particular spider is literally on the epicenter of the pally for a reason. It's injecting its babies into the polyp, so that way when the polyp opens up, they can all just come running out. It's not good. So you definitely don't want that. This one right here is a sundial snail. It's a snail that walks around the tank. It also eats zoanthids. Who knew? And it's such a obvious looking thing. You might say, oh, I like it. It looks neat. Well, that's fine. If you have no zoanthids, I guess it doesn't matter. But if it only eats zoanthids, how long will you be able to keep it alive? So there's that. But sundial snails are, they're pretty big. You can see them. You can easily remove them from the tank. Tweezers or your fingers. This is a Scypha sponge. Scypha sponges are, or Scypha sponge, are a type of filter feeder. They've also been called the pineapple sponge or the Q-tip sponge. A lot of times you'll see them in your overflow box. You'll see them on the side of pumps. You might see them down in the sump. They do no harm at all. They're just little filter feeders. They're actually a good indicator that your system is healthy. Because if you can support these guys, then you're doing a good job for sponges. And now we're to the part of the talk where we talk about too much of a good thing. So I had this really beautiful blue maxima in my tank, about 4.5 inches wide, and I had these zoanthids, and they were growing up the sides of the shell, and they were coming between the mantle. And I was like, man, look at that. That's so cool looking. I actually enjoyed it. I was like, how far is this going to go? What is the clam going to tolerate? And so I just kept an eye on it and just thought, we'll see what happens. And then this happened. I looked down, I was like, are you kidding me? The clam can't even open? So I reached down into the tank and I lifted the clam off, which it came off. By the way, I see a lot of aptasia in this picture too. I lifted the clam off and I thought, now I have to remove these zoanthids. This is going to be a big ordeal. And they peeled off perfectly. Like, they just came off in sheets. Like, oh, that is amazing. So even though the zoanthids were growing on the side of the clam, they were not adhering to the clam, or the clam didn't allow them to adhere. Like, I don't know. All I can say is the zoanthid just came right off. It was amazing. And I put the clam back down on the bottom of the tank, and it opened up immediately. And it was like, thank you so much for helping me, Mark. And I was like, no problem. I'm happy to do so. By the way, in the same picture where you see that clownfish, those are my lavender frilly mushrooms. If you have these, let me know. I have not seen these in 15 years, and I love them. And I would love to get some for one of my tanks. So lavender frillies, it's a type of mushroom. They grow really big around, and they're lavender color. They're beautiful. I had people say, is that a Montipora? What is that? And I had like a whole rock just covered in them at one point. These little feather dusters are paper feather dusters. Their tube is like paper-like. They are very prolific. They will grow everywhere. At one point, one guy told me in my club, Mark, I don't think you could take a single picture in your tank and not show at least one of those feather dusters. They're everywhere. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Who cares? But then, I started to look back and try to look at my reef through his eyes. I'm like, wow, they really are everywhere. And so I reached in and you can just peel them right off. They come off of everywhere. And I would take out fistful and I'd throw them in the sump to give away to someone else that wanted life in their tank. I like feather dusters. I think they're cool. And these are little small ones. They're maybe a 1/2 inch wide, at the crown. And they don't do any harm whatsoever. They grew really well. And I was heavily into dosing phytoplankton back in those days. So that's probably why they did so well for me. These right here are actually named after the state I'm in. The Texas Trash Pally. And people get these pallies like, oh, they're cool, until they find out how quickly they grow and cover everything you own. And then they hate them. And that's why they got that lovely name, Trash Pally. And these have palithoa in them. So when you're removing them from the tank, you have to be careful that you don't somehow get yourself sick. So scraping them off, removing them, peeling them, whatever, it's an ordeal. You got to be really smart at what you're doing. But if you could do this outside where there's ventilation, that helps. But the stuff is on your hands, and it is where you're breathing, and it could scorch you in the face. So you want to be very aware of what you're doing when you're removing them. If you're scraping them off the overflow box, for example, like the whole back of the tank or the back wall, those polyps can all squirt liquid at you. and that can get in your eyes, your nose, your mouth. It can get on your hands, and then if you scratch your face, it's on your face now. If you rub your eye, you've just rubbed it into your eye, which I've seen some terrible eye injuries from palythoa, from palytoxin. So please be very cognizant. We've learned a lot since COVID. Don't touch your face, right? So when you're working in your tank, then you take your wet hands, you go to the sink and you wash your hands. You don't use hot water, because if you use hot water, which you would think, well, that's the best thing, it creates steam, and now you're inhaling palytoxin off your hands into your lungs, and now you're coughing. So we want to wash our hands with soap and water, rinse them really well. We don't want to touch our face. If you want to have like a face shield, you can bring down like a wood shop worker might use, to avoid getting spattered. You totally can. If you want to wear a face mask, you can do that too, or a gaiter, or whatever. There's different methods, but the thing is, you want to remove them, but you want to remove them carefully, or don't even put them in your tank in the first place. There's an example of how many can grow in a tank. And yeah, they hid the overflow box perfectly, but they're just not pretty to look at. They're kind of blah. They're greenish, brownish, meh. Zinnia in the top two pictures. There's pom-pom zinnia, which is hands down my favorite. And then to the right, actually the one to the right might not be zinnia. It might not be Red Sea zinnia. That might be anthelia. Anthelia is another, all these are fast-growing corals right here. All four pictures. You got the pom-pom zinnias, you got the anthelia, you've got the star polyps. These were the pink star polyps. And then you've got mushrooms. And all of these things grow quickly and spread across all your rock work. That's fine for someone new to the hobby that's bored and doesn't like looking at rock. But then, later on when they get serious about other corals, they find out all the good spots where corals would go are taken. And so they have to peel the stuff off or buy new rock and get rid of the old rock entirely with the corals. And then they swear, I'll never put these things in my tank again. That's one of those things. It's a personal preference situation. And you might say, well, hey, a softy tank is easier, less maintenance, less desire for water changes. You're right about all of that. And you can just enjoy a softy tank and not have to think about it. For removal of mushrooms, you can try different approaches, like injecting them with things, Aphantasia, kalkwasser paste, lemon juice, muriatic acid. I mean, there's a lot of different approaches. But mushrooms are super hardy and they tend to come back. So it really comes down to scraping them off the rock. In my case, I would take the rock out of the tank and go to the kitchen sink, or I worked on the work tray above my tank, and I would take dental tools and I'd scrape off every bit of skin so there's nothing left on the rock but rock. And then I put that back in the tank. And I would observe the rock carefully, looking for any bits of life that show up and scrape those guys off too in the next week or two, because I'm trying to eliminate them completely from the system. Aphantasia is another method you can use on them to burn them away. It's a slow process. It's going to use a lot of product because mushrooms are pretty big. Mushrooms also can spin off and land somewhere else and just attach to new rockwork somewhere else in your tank. And you're like, oh no, there's mushrooms over here too? That happens. So that's why I don't like to buy mushrooms. Okay, this thing here, this really pretty green thing, is a type of macroalgae called Neomeris annulata. I love it. I think it's awesome. If you look to the right of that picture, there's a fish. That's a royal gromma. And then to the very edge, you'll see like one or two standing up all by themselves. That's normally what you get. But there was a guy in our club who had this growing everywhere. He had thousands upon thousands. And we're all like, that's so pretty. We loved it. We're like, dude, you're so lucky because I hate this stuff. It's everywhere. Well, it's a cool looking algae. Under the right conditions, it can definitely spread. And it's nice and bright green. It glows great under blue lighting. It's cool, and it only needs calcium to grow. So if you just maintain reef parameters, you can grow Neomeris annulata to your heart's delight. But if you don't like it, you can just scrape it off the rock. Bryopsis is a type of algae that is similar to hair algae, but more coarse to the touch. Hair algae, you just touch it. In German, they call it angel hair because it's so gentle. And you can just peel it right off the rock. It just comes off like hair, right? This stuff, it's more feathery, and the base of it is more like stubble, like after you haven't shaved for a few days. And so if you were to reach in and rip off what you can, you're going to leave the stubble behind, and the stubble will grow more. And that's a real problem with bryopsis. So if you have a spot in your tank that's starting to grow this stuff, you definitely want to deal with it sooner rather than later. What Bryopsis does to stay alive, it because of its texture, the way it's made, with those feathery blades of the plant, it absorbs the detritus and captures it to create its own little deep sand bed. And it's deriving the nutrients from the deep sand bed to grow more of itself. So the first step you would do is take a turkey baster or a powerhead and blow out all the trapped detritus so that it's a naked plant. Okay, that's the first step. Then you can rip off as much as you can, but you're going to leave the stubble behind. But if you keep it clean, it's going to get weaker and weaker, and then maybe some of your herbivorous fish will eat it. Maybe. It's not a tasty plant. They're not big fans of it. The other choice is to take that rock out of the tank and drizzle, like drip, drip, drip peroxide on it, and then after a few minutes, rinse the rock with some tank water, and then put it back in the tank so there's no peroxide on that rock. And then watch over the next few days, that green plant will turn clear, and then it'll just break off, and it'll just dissipate, and it'll be gone. That's another approach. There was a product on the market from Kent called Tech M, which was a magnesium supplement that we were using. And we learned somehow, some guy did, I can't remember who it was. He learned that if you use Tech M and raise your magnesium to 1600, it would kill Bryopsis, which was amazing. But it also stopped all your snails from moving, which is bad. Because now your cleanup crew is frozen in place because their foot muscle no longer moves because the magnesium's too high in the water. But there was some unknown element in that magnesium solution that killed Bryopsis. And lots and lots and lots, hundreds, thousands of people said, well, I raised my magnesium. I'm like, with what? Well, I used my magnesium chloride, or I used Elos magnesium, or I used it. No, it had to be the Kent Tech M. And, people said, what's in this? And Kent said, nothing. It's just magnesium. But at one point, I just told Kent, you guys should just make a bottle that says Bryopsis killer on it and just sell that to us. I mean, you have found the perfect solution. But I heard at some point the recipe changed. So now if you buy Tech M, it probably doesn't do it. So anyway, that's why. Oh, and there's one other thing that'll eat it. And that would be, it's not a picture here, the lettuce nudibranch. So the lettuce nudibranch is beautiful. Remember I told you we have like 6 nudibranchs we know? That's one of them. It is super beautiful. It's pearlescent in color. It's light as a feather. And you put it on the Bryopsis and it eats it. And then you go look for it the next day because now it's in your power head, or now it's down in the sump, or now it's down in the refugium. And you get it and you put it back on the Bryopsis, and you just keep doing that until the Bryopsis is gone. Lettuce nudibranchs are gorgeous. I love them. I saw them while I was diving in Bonaire, and they'd be the size of a carnation. It was crazy. Just a beautiful, beautiful animal. Caulerpa is another thing that we definitely don't want in our reef tanks normally, even though more and more people are leaning toward macroalgae tanks. Here is one right here. And Caulerpa comes in different types. Now in California, you can't even get it. Let me see if I can get back. Oh, see, the camera has moved now. And I don't have it handy. Let me do this, see if I can get myself back in the middle. Is that going to work? Nope. All right, I'll scooch over a little bit more. Caulerpa needs to be peeled out of the tank. It can be, it can go sexual on its own and die of its own accord just because of lack of light. That is another approach. It's not great for the system because all the stuff in the veins of the plant will leach into the system and your water turns green. But it's okay in a refugium. But I was going to say, people in California can't even get this stuff because I guess others were dumping it into the ocean for some reason, or it got in the ocean for some reason. And so they outright banned it in California, which is craziness. Hang on a second here. I'm going to bring out my camera controller so I can get myself in the middle of the square because it's bothering me. Let's see, this way? Hey, it worked. Great. All right. Let's see, next one. Here's a tank with Caulerpa. This was my friend Evan Luck, and his tank, he was in Dallas. This is like a 29-gallon, just packed with algae. And that picture on the upper right had a scroll coral in there. And then the picture on the bottom, that's a clam. And we reached in, we peeled it all out. We spent hours peeling out all the Caulerpa we could. And then, like, I asked him, like, a couple weeks later, how's it going? He goes, it's all back. I was like, oh, so sorry to hear that. And then this one here is something called pink cotton candy algae. And pink cotton candy algae is only eaten by one thing I know of, and that's the Mexican turbo snail, which is the huge snail that's like a bulldozer, and it just eats this. It loves it. So if you ever end up with pink cotton candy, those giant Mexican turbo snails are your friend. Cyanobacteria is not a pest. It is a bacteria. We talked about it last week pretty much in depth. I'll just touch on it briefly. It is a type of bacteria that exists in freshwater, saltwater, brackish water. It's always present. It's never not there. It will always exist. It is part of history. But when it turns red or green or blue and becomes like a mat, that's when we dislike it. And that's why we treat the tank with Red Cyano RX or ChemiClean, not ChemiPure. ChemiClean can remove it. It will remove the red blankets and make the tank pretty again, but it can return. And that's just, the bloom can return. It will always exist in your tank, so whatever. The maiden's hair algae is sort of similar to the bottlebrush algae, and usually it comes down to a single point, and you can pluck it off the rock if you needed to. And then the stuff on the bottom was given me once as red graciolera, and it's not. And I just happened to be sitting next to a booth of someone. I wonder who it is. But there was this booth next to me, and this person was a macroalgae expert. And somebody gave it to me while I was at the show and said, "Here, Mark, you can put this in your refugium." And I've never seen anything like this before. It looks really weird. I don't trust it. So I showed it to the lady in that booth, and she goes, "Oh, don't put that in your tank. Are you crazy?" And I was like, "Someone gave it to me." And she said that this stuff, it's brittle, and it breaks like glass into a million pieces. So if you were to put that in your tank, and then you want to remove it later, you'd break off so many bits, it would just go everywhere, and you just keep growing back. So it did not come home with me. I decided not to take the chance. So that's it. That's the presentation. I hope that you guys enjoyed that, and that it gave you some insight on some stuff. There's plenty more things that we could talk about. We can do other identifications in the future, like all the different types of LPS corals, or all the different kind of acroporas, or all the different kind of... We could do a thing on fish one day or something. So you can let me know in the comments what you'd like. But that is one of the topics that I feel is good for everyone, especially people. There are people that have been in the hobby a long time. It's like, I never knew about that thing. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing it with me. And then there's lots of people that are new to the hobby that have not seen these things. So having this type of video on this channel is going to be beneficial because it'll help them in the future with identifying the critters so they know if it's a good guy or a bad guy. The ultimate takeaway that I want you to have is that life is good, and having lots of things in your tank is beneficial. And if you are determined to kill off everything except for, dry sand, dry rock, and the corals I bought, you're going to have a very boring reefing experience. You might think it's good, but it's not, because whatever's lacking in the biological food pyramid, that affects the long term of your aquarium. And I don't find that every single thing that lives in a tank needs to be murdered. If somebody comes across really cool tunicates, I'm like, awesome, enjoy the life. If they come across a type of algae, well, is it really doing damage, or is it just living in that one spot? Is it something to even worry about? It just comes down to, what is it doing specifically? How invasive is it? What damage is it causing? Is it causing damage, or are you blaming it? Like, for example, bristleworms. People sell bristleworm traps, which just blows my mind. I can't believe people are selling them, and I can't believe people are buying them. Bristleworms do not kill your clams and your fish. They are eating the decay in the tank and the waste. They're processing. And if you drop in pellet food, they'll eat the pellet food. That's just what they do. But because they see a dead clam filled with bristleworms, like, the bristleworms killed my clam. Like, no, they really didn't. They came to eat the clam that had died. Clams, when they die really fast. If you look at them wrong, they could be dead the next day. And your cleanup crew will then clean it out, and you're like, oh my God, the shell is empty. And that tank right there behind me, there is a little clam right under that clownfish right there, right where my finger's pointing. That shell's been like this for a year and a half. It's wide open right now, and it's all bone white inside. Something somehow ate the clam. I'm like, all right, I don't know what happened, but it did. It happened. And there's other clams on the tank. Like, well, and so I'm looking at them. They all look normal. I'm like, all right. Sometimes things happen in a reef tank, and you can't control it all. But to just sit there and say, I can't have anything in my tank because it's probably going to kill something, is a crazy attitude. So just enjoy your tank and enjoy the biodiversity. Include things. Don't don't sit there and fear it all. I think people fear way too much, and they shouldn't, because they're missing out on a lot of really neat stuff. All right. Oh my goodness, there was all these comments. See, the thing sat there all this time, and I thought, wow, everyone's just listening. I apologize. Let me see if I can answer some stuff here. Okay, yeah, there's a ton. Let's go to the Q&A section. I just saw this one thing. I was like, wow, no one's talked for like the last hour. They've just been politely listening. So Andrea says, starfish legs are harder to snap off than you realize, and it's quite horrifying. Trust me. Terra Reef is here. John says, we sell asterinas or aquilonastra for people who run and want to feed their sea stars or other animals. Yeah, so if you want to keep those shrimp alive that we talked about, you could buy asterinas from other people. And then Terra Reef says, who isn't liking this? Needs to be more likes on the video. John says, and I've never heard this, freeze-dried bristleworms are supposed to be a great food for fish. I did not know you could even get freeze-dried bristleworms. That's a new one to me. And then Mina says, what is the worst pest you've ever had to deal with, as in hard to eradicate? I guess the Montipore eating nudibranch was the hardest one, because I ended up throwing away all the coral instead. It just wasn't worth the trouble. They were just everywhere on everything, and it was just easier to just throw it all away and start fresh. So that's one. And then, of course, the Mahano situation that I talked about was in the frag system that I ignored and let them grow to thousands upon thousands. That really was just me. If I just jumped in there and dealt with it when there was 6, it wouldn't have been a problem at all. But I just ignored it. I just ignored the situation because I was focused on other things. And so they ended up being everywhere. Yeah, thanks, Ziggy, for catching that. It took me a minute to catch that. We were talking about them. So I must have inserted it. The funny thing is, when I looked at the file on my laptop, it looked like it was kind of dated, but actually, now I'm thinking about it, it was the one on my computer, because I have my keynote presentations on both devices, and I couldn't find the pest presentation at first on my iPad, so I went to the computer, and it was really old. Like, oh, this is going to be an old one. But this was an actually updated one. Ziggy says, one of my 32-gallon biocubes looks like Mark's frag system, only it was filled with Aptasia, and it was driving me insane. I didn't even talk about bubble algae at all. It didn't even come up. So bubble algae, or Valonia, is a type of algae. It's a single-cell algae. It's the biggest single-cell algae in the ocean, by the way, and emerald crabs eat it. And and also pitho crabs eat it, which is nice. But if you're worried, or you've heard that if they were to be popped, like if you're working the tank and you pop some, the spores will release. That's a myth. It's not true. The single cell algae, that is the algae. That whole thing is a cell, and inside it is salt water. It's not baby Valonias ready to invade your tank. So how do you think, do you really think the emerald crab goes up to it and pops a little hole and slurps out the babies and then eats the shell like the skin off of a drumstick? No, they're eating the algae, and that's why you have less and less Valonia, because the emerald crab is consuming it. But no, if you pop some in your tank, you will not make more. Don't worry. That's a big falsehood. And then Dale says, and we were talking about a crab that was a pest. Remember I said I killed my crab, but you might want to do something that's more humane. So Dale says, I took mine to the fish store once. They immediately dropped in with a puffer, and it ate it so fast. So you see, everything can eat something in the ocean. Oh, that is so cool. Alex says, I have a pagarita crab in some Sunset Montipora. It uses its claws to grind back the Monty skeleton so it doesn't close out the hole. Yeah, I could see that. It doesn't want to lose its little aperture. That makes total sense. Diacanthus Reef says there are some very attractive pagaritas in the Solomon Islands. Man, I'd love to go there someday. I'd have to go back through the genus Dichotomus key to get the ID, though. Wouldn't necessarily trust the photographer's ID for those. Let's see. I'm not sure what what message Tara Reef was talking about, but he said he heard mandarins go after them. I don't think they're commonly available as aquaculture and likely not as suitable for many people's tanks. Let's see. I am so sorry I didn't see all this chat. If I had known, because I kept looking at it, and I was like, wow, no one's put a single thing. Planaria is, actually I'll stick in the chat here. Red Planaria. Obviously, someone probably already commented. And I'm going to lose my spot here in this chat as soon as I hit enter, I bet. Oh, good. No, it did move me. It lost my spot. That's all right. I'll find it again. Let's see. Karsten says, can you tell us about the black, red, and white gray bugs and how to treat and kill them? Well, first of all, I've never in my life seen black bugs. And I've heard of them. I heard of them mostly from people that are either in Australia or getting corals from Australia. But, you know, people would say, these are black bugs. Like, for example, Frank would say those purple planaria that I showed you, he said, those are black bugs. Like, they're not black, they're purple. Where would you come up with that? He goes, well, someone told me they're black bugs. And I was like, okay, well, I disagree. And anyway, I took the pictures of it. I took the video. I stuck a 3-minute video on this channel to the world and said, tell us what this is. And I don't think anyone ever came up with an answer. And a year later, I was reading my Coral magazine, and I turned the page, and there was an article that talked about those exact things. And I quickly ran to my phone and went to find that video. I was like, oh, that's it. That's them. So it was cool to finally have a name, which of course I've forgotten. But those little purple things are really detrimental to Acropora. And in the case of Frank's store, he had this 450-gallon tank with these purple flatworms, and he took every coral out of the tank, and I think he pressure washed all the rock and restarted the tank. And like 9 months later, he had them again, and he did the exact same thing. I mean, ugh. So I was like, again, it's that nuclear option I don't agree with. I just think you shouldn't go to those extremes. But obviously, you don't want to lose corals either. So I would have taken the affected coral out specifically and cut off the infected area, saved what's still good and planted in the tank, and kept a keen eye out for anywhere else. And just kind of keep working the removal rather than treating the entire tank because you're assuming they're everywhere. Because realistically, every pest has a specific food or a specific coral that they're going to be attracted to. And while they can migrate, yes, they definitely can be on the move. I mean, they're flatworms. They're going to travel, but you can keep an eye out for them, spot them, and eliminate them group by group. That would be my suggestion. John says, why can't you use a turkey baster to let the wrasses eat them, like flatworms? The reason being is that they hold on super well. I'm holding this Maxi-Jet Powerhead and pointing at an Acropora eating flatworm for 20 seconds with no movement, and then a flatworm finally peels off into the water column. And I was like, that's why I'm not turkey basting, because you can only do this so many times and your hand gets exhausted. A Powerhead is forever if you have it plugged into the wall. Tara Reef says that my benign white flatworms that I think are totally innocent says they may eat beneficial pods. They're not a super pest, but they're still not welcome in Tara Reef's tanks. All right. Yeah, obviously they're eating something, but in my case, I saw a few, and then I saw none, and I was like, whatever. Aw, Gnarly Duck says, my reefs are doing better after watching many of your videos. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. Yes, I already had covered the ball anemone and the Aptasia early on in the beginning of this video. That's crazy. He said, he or she, I'm going to guess he, said that the ball anemone literally hitchhiked in on a bumblebee snail. That's cool. Come on, man. You got some cool life. They're not bad. I think they're neato. Let's see. Maple Story said, happy Saturday. Happy Saturday to you, too. And he or she has a stomatella in their sump. I'd move it back into the tank because they're great grazers and they eat algae. Also, I didn't mention the microbrittle starfish are totally good. And if you have 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, that's awesome. They are going to be present based on the available food in the tank. So don't fear them. Don't try to get rid of them. Don't be icked out about them. They're fine. and usually they're going to be hidden in the rockwork, but once or twice a year, they may all become super visible because they're all in spawning session, and that's totally okay, and, it's just more food for the corals to consume in the water column. I have not heard this. That's hilarious. The Reef Ed says, I remember beating the Welk in Final Fantasy III. They have a Welk in that game? That's hilarious. John wants to know, I have hundreds of dove snails. Do you regard them as pests or good guys? I think they're okay. I don't remember them being a bad thing. I don't think I've ever had any, but I don't recall reading bad things about dove snails. Also, there's another snail that I found one in my tank, my 280-gallon tank, and it was when I was siphoning out the overflow, and I found this really pretty shell that was the shape of a grain of rice, but about that long, maybe 3/8 of an inch long. It was a peppermint snail, and because of the markings on the shell, was like a peppermint, and really pretty. And I don't know what it eats. I never saw. I just threw it in the reef. I never saw it again. But it was a neat little thing to come across. I like finding new life. That's my favorite part of reef keeping. Ziggy, we're going to have to correct you. He says, I'm literally watching my clownfish finally hosting a nem. That is not true. Your anemone is finally hosting a clownfish. The clownfish is now living in the host, which is the anemone, and I'm very happy for you. It's been in the tank with the anemones for 2 years, and today she finally decided today was the day. That is great, but the host is the home, and the guest is the fish. We got to stop saying it backwards. Ziggy says it's my soothing voice that convinced her to get into the anemone. Let's see what else we got here. John says, I have sponges in my sump. Are the black ones bad? So the black ones are called turkey liver sponge. They're not bad. If they were in and they're in the sump, so they're absolutely nothing to worry about. But if they were in the tank, they tend to grow like a piece of leather across your rock, and they can even kind of encrust on and start to cover over a coral. So in that case, I would then remove some of that where it's touching the coral, like stop it from spreading. I've had it in my tank in the past in a few spots, and I thought it was kind of neat looking. Ron Shemek, who I've mentioned several times on this stream, had said if you were to squirt some milk in front of it, you could watch it suck it in and blow it out, like it would process the milk. And I was like, well, I'll just take your word for it. I'm not putting milk in my reef tank. He's like, but you can. I was like, that's kind of neat. But turkey liver sponge it's not a bad sponge to have. It's just, it could become an invasive one to certain coral species. But if you just have it, like I had it in this one spot where it's kind of in the front, in a spot where there was no coral anyway. I was like, it's just neat. I just look at it. So I ignored it. I wouldn't consider it bad. But, use caution. And then Maple Story says, not sure, but I introduced the bright yellow sponge to my sump and it's grown all over. Yellow sponge loves to grow in dim areas where there's not a lot of light. You will see it like on the underside of rocks and down deep in the lowest part of your tank, or down in your sump, or if you have a barrel full of live rock, it's growing up the wall of the barrel, those kind of things. It's really cool, and I like yellow sponge a lot. Let's see, what else? Yeah, the Terra Reef said he had to go. Says, I love the topic, would love to hear more. By the way, the huge saltwater crocs behind you, awesome. So let me give you an update on the crocs. I shared a video a couple days ago, just a little 2-minute video on YouTube, about how I feed the tank each night. And the crocs are starting to get some color. So there's 3 of them that suddenly their body has turned more yellow. The top is bluish. There's this little pointy fin with a black mark. These are all clues for me. I talked with Matt about this, and I said, you really think I'm going to know what these are? And he's just laughing. So I think I'm being punked a little bit. But he said, you should be able to figure it out. So I guess he's saying now that they're getting their coloration, I have enough clues, I can go Google it and determine what they are. But I can tell you this. Let me move a little bit here. So oh man, I never point the right spot. That right there is a breeder basket, which was in that video. And I looked in it last night, and there are 30 babies in that basket right now. and there was like 2 or 3 loose ones in the main tank that I was trying to capture with a urine cup. You lower the cup in, and the water sloshes in, and you get the little fish, and you pour it in the breeder basket. But I've been trying to catch any so they don't become food for the bigger ones. Just because they're just eating, because they're just swimming around, and that little guy just happens to cross their eye, like, oh, sure, I'll devour you. So I probably lost 5 or 6 to the parents eating them, or the siblings, or whatever you want to call it. But now that I got the breeder basket, I got a whole bunch in there, and I'm still putting baby Brian in there, and of course in the main tank as well. But the oldest ones, today is the 22nd. So the oldest ones, the ones that hatched on the first day I put them in the tank, there was 3. They are 107 days old. So coming up on 4 months old soon, which is kind of cool. And then I've got this whole new next generation that's working behind it. Now, the person that sent me the eggs did say, I think these would be good as a refugium fish. And I'm kind of tempted to take a few and throw them in the refugium under my reef. I don't know. It's just a thought. I might. Who knows? At some point, I'm going to have to sell them. I can't keep 59 of these things plus 30 more to go. So when I know what they are, they will become available. I'll tell you what they are. I'll tell you what I know. And there's a chance that you could do the exact same thing I'm doing, and you could breed them too, and keep the family going. It'll be kind of neato, right? Mario says, what's your thought on putting live rock and sand on these in the sump in the refugium zone? You totally can. You can put sand in there. You can put rock in there. When I do a refugium, I usually recommend just 1 inch of sand because the zone is so small. You're not going to get a deep sand bed benefit. I mean, think about it. Even if you're, here's your tank on top on a stand, right? It's 100 gallons or it's 50 gallons. And then you got the sump that might be 20, 25 gallons. And you got a zone that might be 5 gallons. And you're going to put 5 or 10 inches of sand, to have this deep sand bed. But it's such a small footprint, it really can't do much for your tank. So instead, I just recommend 1 inch of sand. And the reason for the inch of sand is so the benthic fauna that lives in the system, the bugs, the worms, the all the weird little things that you guys say, what is this and what is this? And there's at least 15 things I can think of right now that I've taken pictures of on the sand bed that weren't even in today's live stream that are really cool critters, but they're not something you buy. They're something you get. They came in on a frag plug and they just sneak in. And those things live in sand. And if you have a bare bottom refugium, they can attach to the bottom or live on the bottom or lay on the bottom or run around the bottom. But giving them some grains of sand to live in and on and run across is a good thing. So if you wanted to have a refugium that had a little bit of sand and it had a little bit of rock in there, you totally can. You can even put some snails in there to kind of keep cleaning the walls, keep the walls clean. You can make it pretty. Or you can focus on, I just want to grow macroalgae for nutrient export, and I'm using the rock to hold the algae down so it doesn't float to the surface. You could even put a few Nacerius in there to kind of keep the sand bed from becoming too dirty with detritus. You can even feed the refugium food if you're trying to literally grow things down there. So there's lots of choices. He said, I have Cato down there that's not growing. So the sand won't necessarily make the Cato grow. The rock really doesn't do anything to make it grow either. So it really comes down to what's in your water column and what kind of lighting are you using and for how long are you using the lighting. So if you're trying to grow Cato, are you running the lights 9 hours a day? Does your tank have sufficient iron in it? Because while Cato needs nutrients, it needs nitrate and phosphate, it needs iron too. And that's why Brightwell sells a product called Cato Grow. And you pour that in, and that having these missing elements in the water column can actually benefit the Cato growing. Another thing that, there's other trace elements. I think a scotch, a hint, a whiff of copper also helps Cato grow. But I'm not telling you to dose copper, not at all. But there might be some in Cato Grow in the product. If you read the bottle of the ingredients, it might even say that there's a fraction of a billionth of copper in there too. Okay. Anthony says, is it okay to mix salt mix in a fish only tank? I've been using Tropic Marin Pro, but have a full bucket of Instant Ocean just laying around. Are you saying this is a salt mix meant for a reef, but you're going to use it for fish only? Or are you talking about pouring salt into the tank to mix it into the tank where the livestock is? If it's the first one, yes, you can use whatever salt you want. It doesn't matter what you're using. The salt mix made for reef tanks is just going to have more of calcium, magnesium, the things that a reef tank needs, where a fish only system doesn't have all these demands. So you can use a lesser salt, like you said. And Instant Ocean can totally be used for fish only. We all know that. Even the Georgia Aquarium and SeaWorld and these places use Instant Ocean salt for all these saltwater exhibits. But Tropic Marin Pro, that is made for saltwater reefs, could also be mixed up and used in a fish only tank. I hope that answered your question. But don't mix the salt in the tank where the livestock is. If you're just talking about using a reef salt mix for a fish only tank, yes, you can. Headspacing says, I just stumbled on your stream and you're talking about pests like digitate hydroids. And he followed up with, they send about babies that swim at night. They land and attach in the most random places, often deep in the rockwork. Well, that kind of explains how they would spread. But I never had any issue with them whatsoever in my tank. I thought they were interesting. And then John says, I hope you realize how much you help us with your streams. That is my goal. I will tell you, and I don't get it, and I'm sure it's probably partly because I'm always in here versus being in front of the 400-gallon that people loved seeing so much. But I've noticed that the views are down, but I've noticed the views are down on everyone's channel. Like everyone's just fed up with looking at YouTube. And that could be. So, if you guys are willing to share this video with other people to encourage them to join in and watch. And yeah, I know it's a long video, but and this one here you need to watch. So it needs to be on your big television. And also, I just heard recently, YouTube says that something like 67% of people that are watching YouTube videos are watching on their televisions these days. That's a huge jump from from where it was back in the day. You looked on your phone or you looked on a tablet. But that's why, and I've been broadcasting in 4K for years because I knew it's going on giant screens and it needs to look good. Let's see. We're getting more digitate hydroid help here. The ones that attach deep in the rockwork, they eventually get 4 to 5 inches long, and I've personally watched them sting my euphilia into receding the flesh bands and mesenterial filament. Wow, interesting. And they will constantly sting zoas and stop them from opening. I've stopped feeding my corals altogether, tried coral banded shrimp, Halloween crabs, blue legs, and even added a 6th line. Okay, so because they're deep in the rockwork, and this one clearly is a pest in your tank. Like I said, in mine it was no pest at all. It was just cool. You can go ahead and glue shut any hole that this hydroid is coming out of. So that's it. Just a drop of super glue gel on that hole, and you just keep doing it. And the worms, they'll die. And then eventually you can chip that all off and make your rock porous again. But that is your solution there. Thomas, thank you very much for the super chat. He says, my mandarins will be delivered Wednesday. Hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Speaking of Thanksgiving coming up, I probably won't do a live stream next weekend. I don't know. We'll see, but don't get your hopes up. There's a chance I won't be doing a stream. John says, Kato strips certain elements from my corals are so much better without them. Chaetomorpha also grows in surges. So, it's growing really well, and then suddenly it just stops growing, and then it starts growing really well. I really think that has to do with the elements that are lacking in the water column. Then you do your water change, you've replaced what's lacking, and suddenly it starts growing again. I don't think it's a surge-type growing plant. I think that it needs specific things to grow. And when you think about the needs of... And then there's also this. This is something I didn't know until 2 years ago during Markna. Tia Davis said that there are different types of Chaetomorpha, and I didn't know that. I thought there was one. And I forget how many she said there were, but there were a couple that absolutely do terribly in reef tanks, and there are others that grow really well. So if you're really not growing it, You might have the wrong kind. You might not have the right conditions. You might have too much lighting. There's several things to take into mind. So you might have to do some more homework to figure out which one you have, which one you need, and what it needs specifically for it to grow well. Eric says, received my biota fish and the Peacemaker is working great. I'm so glad to hear that. Okay, good. So you are pre-mixing the salt in the trash can. Great. I'm glad you clarified that with me. I was just getting a little bit nervous. So yeah, no, any salt mix is fine. All right, I got to the end of the chat. So sorry I didn't notice that earlier, guys. That was a goof on my part. So we have been talking now for, how long? Oh, the thing's off again. 2.5 hours! Oh my god, no one's going to watch this video. It's too long. I want to remind you guys, today is Water Test Saturday. Please do test your water parameters. Check your alkaline, your calcium, your magnesium. Check your temperature. See what it's been all week long. The weather is changing for certain parts of the U.S. You know, we're 82 degrees and we're 45 degrees, and so you may be using air conditioner in the daytime, heaters at night. You might leave it in air conditioner mode and your house gets too cool, you know, and the heater's not coming on because outside and your tank is getting too cold. Make sure your tank is stable, especially these times of year with weather patterns changing around you that could affect the livestock. And overheat the tank. Because now, okay, like here in Texas, I went to go check on a guy's tank on Tuesday. And as soon as I walked in, there was an alarm going off. And the tank was 82 degrees. Well, when he left town, Texas was cold, so he had the heater on. Now the house is too warm, and it was 87 degrees out. And so he says, can you please switch it to air conditioner before you leave? So I did. So, but now, you know, we've had some change of weather again. I wonder, and I'm going to go again on Monday, but I'm kind of like keeping an eye on things like, do I need to run over there and switch back to heat for him so the tank doesn't get too cold? Or will his heaters be able to keep up with a cold house? There's all these things. So make sure you're tracking your temperatures this time of year. Make sure that your heaters are working as we head into the winter months. If you have one big heater, I'm going to tell you to get rid of it and get 2 smaller heaters instead. Because if a smaller heater gets stuck in the on position, it can't boil your tank, where one big heater totally can cook your tank and kill all your livestock. So important. I'm sure we'll be talking about heaters again in the coming months. Also, you want to check your nitrate and your phosphate. Make sure that those levels are somewhere reasonable so your nutrients aren't too crazy high, which can lead to stagnated coral growth. What else? If you're thinking about doing an ICP test, you know, I always suggest taking the water sample out of your tank on Monday and shipping it off rather than Friday, where it sits in the shipping system over the weekend. You know, but do test your water parameters, find out where things are going, and that way you can turn around and you can enjoy your reef and not be freaked out and not worried, and you know that everything is well. And if you're not testing your water, you're being bad. I'm gonna call you bad. I'm just gonna do it because it's my channel and I get to say what I want to say. Guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend, even you bad ones, and I will see you in a week, maybe. And if you don't see me in a week, you'll know it's because I told you there was a chance I wouldn't be there. Bye.